It is the biggest night yet in the presidential race, with a slew of contests from Virginia in the east all the way to California that will likely push Donald Trump to the brink of clinching the GOP nomination. We are tracking every single vote, including in North Carolina, where right now people are lined up to cast ballots on this pivotal night in the fight for the White House. Welcome to CNN's live Super Tuesday coverage. I'm Erin Burnett in New York.
And I'm Jake Tapper in Washington. We're less than an hour away from the first major round of poll closings and the first results on this history-making, norm-shattering primary night. Donald Trump, former president, now a criminal defendant 4 times over, hopes to continue his extraordinary winning streak and end the night very close to locking up his 3rd Republican presidential nomination. That's possible because the race for the White House is going national tonight, with 16 states holding contests and a whopping total of 865 delegates at stake for the Republicans. That's more than 1/3 of all Republican delegates. The keys, obviously, to winning the nomination. Now, Trump is hoping to sweep those delegates as he looks to build this insurmountable lead over his last remaining GOP opponent, Nikki Haley, and further tighten his grip on the Republican Party. Haley still fighting, seeking openings to cut into Trump's support. We're going to be closely watching to see if she can pull off any upsets this evening, and if so, where? All of this likely setting the stage for a widely expected Biden-Trump rematch in November. We're going to keep tabs on President Biden's scorecard in Democratic primaries tonight as he moves toward making his nomination official. He just picked up his first win this evening in the Democratic caucuses in Iowa. Now, here's a roadmap of what's going to happen tonight. 7 Eastern, voting ends in Virginia and Vermont. A half hour later, polling places close in North Carolina. At 8 Eastern, we're going to look for results from Oklahoma, Alabama, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and Maine. At 8:30, we focus on Arkansas. At 9 Eastern, all polls close in Texas, Colorado, and Minnesota. Texas has the second biggest pool of delegates tonight. At 11 Eastern, voting will end in California. That's the top delegate prize in the nation. Also in the Utah Republican caucuses. Alaska will cap the night with polls closing at midnight Eastern. And our correspondents, they're fanned out across the United States of America, covering tonight's contests, covering the candidates. First, let's go to CNN's Kristen Holmes. She's at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, where Donald Trump is hosting a Super Tuesday watch party. And Kristen, what is the Trump team looking for this evening?
Well, Jake, the Trump team understands that he's not going to cross that delegate threshold and become the presumptive nominee tonight, but they are hoping for 2 things. One, that he gets enough delegates tonight so that he can actually reach that milestone as early as next week to become the Republican nominee. And 2, that he wins by such a definitive margin that it puts pressure on Nikki Haley to drop out. Now, they're not waiting for that. They've already pivoted to the general election. Tonight's contests are really going to give them some insight into where and how they spend their resources in a general election. One thing I want to point out, and it's striking to me to see, the last time I was at a political event in this very ballroom at Mar-a-Lago was when Donald Trump announced back in 2022. That was a very different time. Almost nobody showed up. There were no congressional members. I was getting calls from allies who now, by the way, work for the campaign, who were calling me to say that it was embarrassing, that he couldn't believe that he was actually announcing that this was going to go nowhere and he should just bow out gracefully. Now we're looking at a night in which he is on the cusp of potentially becoming the GOP nominee. A lot has changed in the last year and a half, and we've also started to see Republicans coalesce behind the former president, those same Republicans who had not so nice things to say when he announced his candidacy.
All right, Kristen Holmes in Palm Beach. Let's go to Kylie Atwood now, who's in Charleston, South Carolina, covering the campaign of Nikki Haley. Kylie, what do we know about Governor Haley's plans tonight, expectations tonight, and her plans going forward?
Well, listen, Nikki Haley is monitoring the results here in South Carolina, her home state. It's not one of the states that is voting tonight, but she has made no explicit promises about keeping her campaign alive after tonight's results are tallied. And that is a very different tactic than she took ahead of the primaries that we have seen in the major previous contests. In Iowa, she talked about going to New Hampshire, where it would turn into a 2-person race with former President Trump. In New Hampshire, she talked about going to South Carolina, her sweet home state, Her campaign put out a memo talking about fertile ground in Super Tuesday states. And then in South Carolina, days before that primary, she said she wasn't going to go anywhere no matter what happened in her home state, saying that she would compete through Super Tuesday. Today, we don't have any future campaign events on the schedule for her. We don't have any campaign memos talking about future sweet spots for her campaign. And we should note, her campaign points out, it's not apples to apples. There are more than a dozen states voting. Her campaign is really looking through a lot of the results that are coming in tonight, trying to digest all of that. This doesn't mean that she's going to end her campaign necessarily tonight, but what it does mean, Jake, is that tonight will very clearly dictate what happens to her campaign after Super Tuesday.
All right, Kylie Atwood in Charleston, South Carolina. Let's check in with one of the key states tonight, North Carolina, where we find Diane Gallagher at a polling place in Cornelius, which is a town outside Charlotte. Diane, you're talking to voters in Cornelius, North Carolina. What are you hearing from them?
You know, Jake, abortion, education, immigration, and democracy. Those are the main issues that voters here in Cornelius tell me have inspired them to come out for the primary today. And you can see they are out right now. We have quite a line that is building. Now, look, North Carolina law does not allow me to go up and speak to them in the line. I've got to stay about this far back. But we've seen steady turnout throughout the day here. And I'm going to bring in a voter right now who actually just finished her voting, casting her ballots. With me now is Ellen Rosenfeld. And Ellen, which ballot did you pull? The Democrat, the Republican?
The Republican.
Who did you vote for at the top of the ticket?
At the top of the ticket, I voted for Chris Christie. And it wasn't that I'm pro Chris Christie, but I feel like he is the least undesirable of all of the candidates. I'm from the Northeast. I know what he's done. He's articulate. He's smart. I'm not a supporter, but I feel like we've got to do something different.
Why not Nikki Haley, since she's still in the race?
A couple of things. I didn't like what she said about slavery. I didn't like that she lost in her own state. That doesn't, speak well.
What will you do in November? Because it does look like at this point, based off delegates, Donald Trump is probably going to be the Republican nominee. Who will you vote for in November?
I will, if he's on the ballot for any party, I will vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And otherwise I'll see, but I would not vote for Trump or Biden. I would either abstain or vote for somebody else.
And lastly, North Carolina has a very long down ballot right now, including a very watched nationally governor's race. Who did you vote for on the Republican ballot when it comes to governor here?
I don't even remember the person's name. It was the top one. I wanted to make sure that Mark Robinson doesn't win because he is a hateful, sarcastic, nasty person, and I just said I must vote against him.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for your time. I appreciate you exercising your right to vote today. I'm going to send it back to you guys. But again, as you can see, lots of people out here in North Carolina finishing up. Polls close at 7:30.
All right, Diane Gallagher in Cornelius, North Carolina, with a little Vox Populi, and we're getting an early read on who's turning out to vote in Virginia and North Carolina. Two key contests tonight. Let's go check in with David Chalian when it comes to what we're getting from the exit polls. What are you learning?
Yeah, Jake, we're trying to understand what is the makeup of the electorate in these two early East Coast states, Virginia and North Carolina. One of the questions we asked is, do you consider yourself part of the MAGA movement? In Virginia, only 31% said yes, they consider themselves part of the MAGA movement. Now, these are preliminary numbers. They'll change as the night goes on, but we'll see, because that's about as low as we've seen all nomination season long. 59% in Virginia say no, they don't consider themselves part of the MAGA movement. In North Carolina, it's a more MAGA-fied electorate. 39% say they are part of the MAGA movement. 54% say they are not. Then we asked, what are your feelings if indeed Donald Trump wins the nomination? So in Virginia, 62% of Republican primary voters today say they would be satisfied if Donald Trump wins the nomination. That is similar to what we saw in New Hampshire, which he won, but wasn't his best state. 36% would say dissatisfied. In North Carolina, it just seems like friendlier territory for Trump in this Republican primary tonight. 74%, three-quarters, said they'd be satisfied with Trump as the nominee in North Carolina. 24% say they'd be dissatisfied. Jake, if I'm sitting in Trump campaign headquarters, I'm looking at those dissatisfied chunks and saying, how much work do I have to do to get those voters on board with Trump between now and November?
Yeah, because those are two states he needs to pick up. North Carolina, he needs to maintain. And, of course, Virginia, he'd like to pick up. David Chalian, thanks so much. We'll be checking in with you throughout the night. John King at the Magic Wall. A lot of delegates, a lot of states. Let's take a look. What do you got?
And as we count them, both that voter with Diane and what you just went through with David should guide us through the night. Because if you look at this is where we begin. This is impressive. You cannot deny this. Donald Trump is on a march to the Republican nomination. You have to go here. You can just barely see it. The District of Columbia is Nikki Haley's only win. And Donald Trump not only has 276 delegates to begin the night, but if you look at it that way, Jake, if your team's getting 83% of the available scores, then you'd say, wow, that's pretty good. And it's impressive. However, there's weaknesses beneath the strengths, and that's what you watch as you go through these states tonight. So what do we look for? Let's just come back to the delegate count. We're going to get the early results on the East Coast, so you start in Vermont. If you go back to 2016, this was not Donald Trump's best state. He won Vermont, but just barely. John Kasich, you see a lot of the light pink. That's John Kasich, a little bit of Marco Rubio in the state right there. Vermont does have a much less Trumpy Republican Party. So you're watching, number one, have they warmed to Donald Trump? Or number two, if Nikki Haley does well, maybe she wins. Where is she winning, and what does that tell us?
She was endorsed by the Republican governor.
Endorsed by the Republican governor, who is not a Trump fan. Now, again, it's one of 15 states. So if Nikki Haley's doing well in Vermont tonight, they can't throw a party in Charleston. It's something. You want any wins you can get. But if you look at this map and you go west, Trump is wired in most of these states. But you do look in these early results, just like in Haley's home state of South Carolina, right? That's a huge Trump win. But what happened? He's weaker in the suburbs, right? That's one thing we have seen consistently since 2016. Narrowly won the suburbs against Hillary Clinton, has been weak in the suburbs since. So when we get the votes later tonight in Virginia, where are we going to look, right? She won in the District of Columbia. You're going to look up here. Because you can bet, right now, that's going to be Trump, right? That's rural, small town America. That's Trump country. The question is he solidifying? Is he at least stabilizing in the suburbs, or does she continue to beat him in the suburbs? Because it won't stop him from winning the nomination, but that's what they'll study in the Biden campaign tonight. So you're looking for clues. There's no doubt, though, if you come out to the MAD map, and we can switch over here for just 1 second. If you look at this, again, Donald Trump has weaknesses, some glaring weaknesses, and yet this is an impressive march to the nomination. If things go tonight, if he continues to win delegates at the rate, the pace he's been winning them so far, right? There's where you start the night at 276. By the time we're done with California tonight, he could be way up here. In Alaska, he could be about 100 delegates shy of clinching, 1,215. So this night is absolutely critical to the Trump campaign's math. They want to get this over with, both symbolically and mathematically, and move on to running against Biden. If they have a very good night, when we're standing here next Tuesday, it's more than likely that Donald Trump crosses the line. So tonight, this is where he starts. But as we go national, as you said, the right way to put it, as the primary campaign goes national tonight, Donald Trump, he's already made a big statement. Tonight he gets a chance to make a giant statement about his grip on today's Republican Party.
All right, John King, thanks so much. And Dana Bash, this night is pivotal as to what the next 8 months are going to look like.
No question about it. And just to bounce off of what John was talking about and what those exit polls showed, one of the questions, and I should say I'm here with my friends and colleagues, tremendous anchors and reporters, and we're all talking to our sources about what to expect tonight. On that question of some potential weaknesses that Donald Trump, let's just start with Trump, and his campaign are looking at, the question of Virginia, let's just start there. The Trump campaign has an entire list of specific counties in specific states that are voting tonight, looking at what the voters are going to do. Just for example, Virginia, Spotsylvania County, Virginia, they're looking at that. Marshall County, Alabama, Sebastian County, Arkansas, and the list goes on and on. Why are they looking at these specific counties? To see what they can learn for the next 8 months. Pivotal swing counties, pivotal voters that make up the electorate there.
Yeah, they don't expect to be surprised by the outcome tonight,
Exactly.
but they're looking for little hints. And what John mentioned, their weaknesses potentially for these candidates. And maybe not Trump himself is looking at those, but certainly his political team is. And they expect that he's going to cruise through this Super Tuesday. That is not really anything that's been up for surprise. That's why there's hundreds of people gathered at Mar-a-Lago right now. But the one thing that they are hoping to do tonight, and one thing that I'm told repeatedly that has been bothering Trump, is how on all of these election nights, the conversation is often about his big victories, but then it shifts typically when it was in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, to the percentage of the vote that Nikki Haley got, that what Trump did not get, the people who are not voting for him, because that is where those weaknesses could very well be with independent or with suburban voters that could very well hurt him in the general election. What I'm told they're looking to do tonight is to kind of extinguish that and to not have that narrative and shift away from it. They are confident essentially that they'll get there because they feel like the race is nationalizing. And these are places where Nikki Haley has not campaigned as intensively.
Well, so far, these exit polls are similar to what we've seen in some of these other states, including some swing states. Virginia is looking a lot like New Hampshire. New Hampshire is going to be a battleground state in November. Virginia is as well. And that is a real warning sign. 36% of Republican voters would be dissatisfied if Trump were the nominee. And, you know, Trump, and for Nikki Haley, I mean, 48% of her voters, according to the New York Times poll that came out over the weekend, actually voted for Joe Biden in November. What happens to those other 31% of voters who did not vote for Joe Biden come November? Will they ultimately vote for the Republican nominee? Will they vote for Trump at the end of the day? That's going to be a big question, a big warning sign if these results turn out the way the exit polls look.
Yeah, look, I don't think we know what's going to happen to that solid 30% of the Republican electorate who's been coming out to these primaries. First of all, who are they? Are they people who actually are gettable for Trump in the first place? Maybe or maybe not. That, I think, remains to be seen. But this day, I think, and this week and probably next week, the most important period, I think, for the Biden campaign, as it helps them accomplish one of the most important things, which is to clarify in voters' minds that Trump is going to be the nominee.
Definitely.
The American electorate just does not believe that this is happening, and they won't until it's real. And that is actually going to be a boon for Biden, and it also is one of Trump's biggest weaknesses. He is dominant in this Republican electorate, but he is also so incredibly polarizing. Trump draws out people like that woman that Diane Gallagher talked to, who was like, I just got to get out and do and say something. He brings those people out of the woodworks, too.
I mean, I tend to look at this thing kind of very big picture, which is that these primary voters have told the electorate, this is the deal. No matter what you think, this is the deal. This is who we are presenting to you as our first and most valid vision of the party. And a lot of these questions haven't changed. So I think the Trump folks must know that suburban women or et cetera, people who are not rural, older, no college degree voters are not his sweet spot. And they've got to figure out what to do between now and then so that he's not a one-term president. Exactly. And similarly with Biden, there's another two states, I think Minnesota and Colorado, that might have a uncommitted campaign going on. Again, it's about sending a message. That's what primaries really are for. They're not about saying, look, who's going to win. It's like the party saying to the country, here's the setup. This is what we think our visions are.
And that's what we're going to see likely, maybe not officially by the end of tonight, but unofficially. You're going to have 4 men who are going to say 4 more years. So this Super Tuesday, though, is just getting started. We're going to cover a lot of ground in the coming hours as we map out the wins and losses in both parties. The scorecard could change very soon, so stay with us.
All right, we are following the action at polling places across the United States on this Super Tuesday. Millions and millions of Americans are voting in Republican and Democratic primaries that are going to reveal a whole lot about where the presidential race is headed into the weeks and the months ahead as we count to November. Welcome back to CNN's special coverage. One of the states that we are watching tonight is Colorado. Our John Berman is there in Castle Rock specifically, which is just outside of Denver. So, John, you've been there talking to people, observing turnout throughout the day. What's happening there now?
Hey, Aaron. Well, behind me, you actually see something. It's not an anomaly, but it's a little bit rare. These are people lined up to vote in person here in Colorado. Why is that rare? Because the vast majority, I'm talking like 85% or more, actually vote by drop box. They've been able to drop their ballots off in drop boxes just like this one, more than 400 of them around the state for days and days now. This is actually a drop box where people can come even today and leave their ballots, then they can go about their merry way. But the people you're seeing over there, they can still vote in person. They can even register to vote today and then do it in the traditional way. We're going to walk outside here because we're going to talk to a voter. On the way, I'm going to remind you, Aaron, Colorado has been in the news a lot lately. Why? Because the Supreme Court weighed in yesterday and said that states cannot ban Donald Trump from being on the ballot for being an insurrectionist. In my hand here, as we're walking more than 100 feet away from the voting location, in my hand is one of those ballots. You will see Donald Trump's name is on that ballot. the voters that we've been talking to have mostly been saying, the Republican voters have been saying, the court cases, the various issues surrounding Donald Trump, if they're Republicans, they say they don't make them less likely to vote for Donald Trump. They say they make them more likely. Democrats, it's the opposite. Donald Trump is the reason they say they're showing up. I'm joined now by a voter. By the way, I have no idea who she voted for or why she came today, but your name is?
Melissa Harrison.
Melissa, what brought you out to the polls today?
I just want to have my vote, have it counted.
What are the issues that are most important to you?
The economy, the border.
Who'd you vote for today?
Donald Trump.
Now, do any of the court cases, the criminal charges against him, any of those weigh on your vote at all?
No, and I don't believe he lost the last election.
You don't believe he lost the election?
No, I believe he won.
He did lose the last election. You do know that.
I don't believe that.
Okay, but so you think that you believe incorrectly that Donald Trump won the last election, and you still support him today?
Absolutely.
Anything that could change your support for him going forward?
No.
Even if he's convicted of a crime?
No.
All right. That speaks a lot to the support that does exist for Donald Trump among Republican voters. It is interesting to hear that level of support among Republicans. We will say, we've talked to Democrats, too, who say the only reason they're out here today, Aaron, is to vote for Joe Biden to stop Donald Trump. Aaron?
All right. I mean, that was a fascinating conversation and very honest. It's actually good to see a conversation like that. And we're going to talk a lot more about what that voter just told John, that very clear and a view that obviously is not going to change no matter what that she has. I want to get some more insights, though, into the mindset of voters in two other key states, right? She obviously is giving one anecdote from the state of Colorado, but exit polls from Virginia and North Carolina, David Chalian, where you are getting a better picture of the entire electorate there of who chose to vote. What are you learning now?
Yeah, Aaron, John Berman could not have teed this up better. That was one voter, but we see it broadly in these exit polls in both North Carolina and Virginia. In Virginia, do you think Biden legitimately won the 2020 election? Now, here we see more of an even split of those participating in the Republican primary. 45% say yes, Biden legitimately won. 46% incorrectly say no, Biden did not legitimately win the 2020 election. That's similar to what we saw in New Hampshire, a sort of even split. If you look, though, in North Carolina, it's a different story. Far more election deniers in the North Carolina Republican primary electorate. 60% incorrectly say that Biden did not legitimately win the 2020 election. Only a third, 34%, say correctly that Joe Biden did win. We also asked that follow-up question that John Berman asked that voter in Colorado. If convicted of a crime, is Donald Trump still fit for the presidency? A majority in Virginia voting in the Republican primary today, 53%, say yes. Even as a convicted criminal, Donald Trump is fit for the presidency. 40% say no. In North Carolina, it is even more so. 64%, nearly two-thirds of voters participating in the Republican primary in North Carolina say yes, Donald Trump is fit for the presidency even as a convicted criminal. Only 32%, Aaron, say no, he is not.
It's really incredible to see it because what we just saw there, right, are the statistics that David is providing, and then just that one interview that John Berman did with that voter, the anecdote, David Urban, it clearly shows this is consistent.
It's consistent. It's not going to change. And look, the legitimacy or illegitimacy of these prosecutions, that's the narrative that underlies a lot of the Trump campaign moving forward, right? So when asked if Trump is convicted, right, will you still vote for him? A lot of people don't care because they think that the basis of all those cases is illegitimate to begin with. So that doesn't matter to them at all, right? And then the other portion of the electorate that's responding and saying, the 40% in Virginia, for example, that said we find it troubling. If he is on the ballot, if it's the only choice between him and Joe Biden, I'm wondering if those people would still come home election day and vote for Trump. That's the question that's not asked.
That's the fundamental question.
And that's the big one, right?
Do these people, when faced with a choice, where do they fall? And the same is true to some degree for some of these Biden voters who say that he's too old. In one of the weekend polls, 12% of people who said that Trump was guilty of serious federal crimes, in other words, they accepted that he had committed serious federal crimes, said they would vote for Trump anyway. But I don't think we're going to really know until we see these guys pitted against each other.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that's what tonight is going to start to sort of firm up for us, is this contrast. We heard some discussion earlier, and it's true. I can tell you, the Biden campaign certainly has polling that shows that people don't believe Donald Trump's going to be the nominee. A lot of them also don't believe Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. So as we see this, as we see tonight,
be a surprising night for
all of the facts, alternate realities. Well, and in some ways that is a byproduct of the Trump era, right? I mean, people really do just choose their own facts. But that's why tonight, while the outcome tonight is perhaps a foregone conclusion, what it's actually doing is setting up this contrast. And I also think that these numbers show. 36% of Republican voters in Virginia say they'd be dissatisfied if Donald Trump were the nominee. That's not an insignificant number of Republican voters. I mean,
I think a lot of them.
The question is, does dissatisfied mean they go somewhere else?
Yeah, but
that's a different question.
I think a lot of them may have already voted for Joe Biden one time, and now they're coming out to vote against Donald Trump again. To me, the horse race tonight is secondary to some of the more tectonic things we're seeing in our politics, the rapid changing of the Republican Party, the outflow of these suburban, college-educated people like you're going to see in Northern Virginia. They're leaving, they're gone, and the inflow of this working class, multi-generational, multiracial, out of the Democratic Party into the Republican Party. It is tectonic, and it changes everything about the framework we have used for 30 years to cover our politics. And the idea that the Democratic Party, and this is undercovered in my opinion, is losing the mantle of being, for my whole life, we're for the working class, we're for the little guy, we're for the people being crushed by the corporations and the government. The people that was aimed at are gone, and they're going to the Republican Party. And what does that mean for the policy future of these two parties? To me, that's a huge story, and we're going to see this rapid movement on that tonight.
Well, I mean, I do think you see some of it. I think that, to your earlier point, I think people really are in denial. This is where we are as a country. I think there are people who literally, people come to me on the street. Do you think that Biden's going to run again? I'm like, he's running. It's happening. Yeah. And so I think that we don't actually know when this actually lands on people what they're going to do. I do think that Biden is more burdened than I think Democrats want to accept by some of the disaffection with the working class, some of these younger voters. That stuff is very scary. You're going to see a bit of that tonight. But I do believe that Donald Trump, for a lot of us, it's not tonight Donald Trump versus Nikki Haley. It's Donald Trump versus democracy. I mean, for a lot of us, you have people who are voting in the Republican primary who are Democrats, not because they're trying to screw anything up, but because they're that passionate about the threat he poses.
But I think what's remarkable about this moment is both Joe Biden and Donald Trump have glaring vulnerabilities. And this election's ultimately going to come down to who can close that gap. So with Trump, you see this, let's call it 30% Nikki Haley voters. How many of those are not willing to go over to him? And I have to wonder, with the number one issue for voters across the board being border security, where Donald Trump outperforms Joe Biden 2-1 on it, you're going to be able to bring some of those Republicans home. But to Joe Biden, to Van's point with Joe Biden, if you argue this democracy message, can you peel off a small number of those who just can't quite bring themselves to pull the lever for Donald Trump? It's an open question.
Yeah,
right? Stay with us.
Up.
It's a long night.
No, I know.
It's a long night.
I don't want to disgorge it all at once.
6 minutes are up, We are getting closer and closer to the first major round of poll closings in the Super Tuesday presidential primaries. As we stand by for results, we are going to hear from the Democratic Senator and former presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren. She's joining us in the CNN Election Center with her take on tonight's contests and the looming Biden-Trump rematch.
You're looking at a live shot from Richmond, Virginia, one of 16 states, millions of voters. They don't call it Super Tuesday for nothing. Where will the fight for the Republican presidential nomination stand once the last ballots are counted after today's contest? We are minutes away from critical results. Let's go to Jeff Zeleny, who's here in Washington, D.C. And Jeff, Super Tuesday is an important pivot point, theoretically, for both the Biden and Trump campaigns.
Well, Jake, tonight, advisors to both President Biden and former President Donald Trump actually agree on one thing, and that is that the general election battle is finally nearly underway, and it's poised to accelerate dramatically this week. Of course, the bookend of these Super Tuesday results, as well as the State of the Union address on Thursday. But talking to Biden officials, one advisor told me this can't come soon enough. They have been frustrated by the sort of lack of urgency among Democrats, that there's not a sense of a fear of a Trump comeback. It's been exactly 50 days since the Iowa caucuses, and this advisor said they assumed that the Democratic base would rally behind the idea of Donald Trump coming back. That has not happened. But one advisor says in the State of the Union on Thursday, they plan to show who Donald Trump is. Of course, you might wonder, haven't they already been doing that? But they believe there will be more of a stark contrast. As for the Trump campaign, they believe that this will be, quote, all about Biden. One advisor tells me they are very happy with where this race is, about immigration, about the economy, but they are watching tonight the results in the suburbs of Minneapolis, the suburbs of North Carolina cities as well, to see what they will need to do to unify the Republican Party. Jake, of course, the electorate different in the primary than the general, but tonight this race finally seems joined. Jake.
All right, Jeff Zeleny in D.C., thanks so much. Joining us now in CNN Election Center here, Senator, former Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren of the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Thanks so much for being here, Senator. So Donald Trump's pretty close to winning the Republican nomination to get enough delegates to clinch it, despite what happened January 6th, 91 criminal counts, being found liable of sex abuse and defamation. Despite all of that, this race has not really been competitive on the Republican side. What do you make? It's a two-parter for you, Professor. What do you make of, A, the fact that Donald Trump does seem to have this clinched up and has the whole time, and B, that even with all those vulnerabilities, it's competitive, if not Trump in the lead against Biden?
So let's do the first part. Donald Trump's supporters are Donald Trump's supporters. You know, ask them. Many of them are election deniers. They're in with Donald Trump all the way. But here's the part that I think is really important. Donald Trump really hasn't done anything in the last 3 years to try to expand the number of people to join the Trump family. And I think what this is going to come down to is going to just be a comparison. We're already there. And we're going to have two people who both have been president and who will have records to run on. So Donald Trump, basically 4 years as president, did two things. One, he got an extremist Supreme Court that overturned Roe versus Wade. And two, he got the biggest tax cut in a zillion years, $2 trillion, mostly sucked up by millionaires, billionaires, and giant corporations. Joe Biden, in 3 years, has managed to cut costs for working families. So now there's $35 insulin. 4 million people have seen their student loan debt canceled. And he has also brought more fairness to the tax code. First time we have a 15% minimum corporate tax on these billionaire corporations, and largest climate package in the history of the world. So I think what they've done is going to be a big part, certainly not all of it, but a big part of how this election is going to shape up.
Senator, one of the things you just said was that Donald Trump hasn't done anything to expand his base or his electorate. What they are trying to do in the Trump campaign is very much encroach on traditionally Democratic voters, Black voters, Hispanic voters. Some of the things that you just said are the arguments that, of course, we expect the Biden campaign to make going forward. There is some frustration in Democratic quarters that those kinds of arguments aren't coming more specifically and loudly from the president himself.
So I think what you're saying is the president needs to brag more.
I'm asking you.
I think he should brag more. I think he's got plenty to brag about. Thursday's going to be the State of the Union. I hope he does a lot of bragging. I also hope that he talks about the things he wants to do, like universal child care and housing, the things we need to work on. But here's the thing I think most of all. I hope that what we're going to see is just Joe Biden being Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden ultimately has got a good heart. I know who Joe Biden fights for. Joe Biden gets out there every day and fights for people like the diabetic who has gone from paying $200 a month to $35 a month, for the person getting crushed by student loan debt, the public school teacher who just can't pay off those debts. He's out there fighting for those people. He's fighting for people who wanted a job and now have got a job. That's Joe Biden. Trump, who does he fight for? Donald Trump, first and last.
I don't think I'm giving you any news you don't know, but there are a lot of warning signs going off on how effectively Joe Biden is going to be able to rebuild the coalition that got him elected in 2020. A lot of progressives, a lot of Muslim Americans and Arab Americans in Michigan, certainly, but not only them, other progressives upset with the way he supported Netanyahu during this war. I know that a lot of Democrats are really worried about those voters, 100,000 in Michigan who voted uncommitted, not voting for Trump, but either staying at home or going third party, going for Cornel West, going for Jill Stein, going for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. How worried are you, and what do you say to those voters to get them to come home?
So I want to start in a different place, because for me, this isn't about politics. This is ultimately about doing what's right. I understand that there are extraordinarily passionate feelings about what has happened in Gaza, what has happened in Israel. People feel very engaged and very invested. And the key is that we're all trying to drive to the same place. And that is, we need a permanent, peaceful solution in the Middle East. Look, we got 4 things we need to do, and we need to do them right now. We need those hostages returned. We need a ceasefire. We need to open up so that there is plenty of humanitarian aid flowing in. And we need to push leadership so that it's moving toward a permanent peace. That is a 2-state solution. That is 2 places for 2 peoples who can live in peace with dignity, security, and who can have self-determination for their futures. And as much as wrong, there's a sliver of hope that this moment opens up, that other countries in the region are ready to push. The United States, we need to push hard, and we need to push those parties toward a peaceful solution. That's where we want to get. We need to push harder to get there.
Senator Elizabeth Warren from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, thanks so much for being here. In addition to the presidential race, there are many other high-profile contests that we are paying attention to tonight. Specifically, Boris Sanchez is staying on top of that for us. Boris, give us the rundown of some of the key races you're following.
Yeah, Jake, we're watching some very competitive down-ballot primary races tonight. Battles for seats in Congress and for governor across a handful of states. Let's start with the Senate primary in California. It's a top 2 primary. That means that the candidates are on the same ballot regardless of party affiliation. The top 2 vote getters then square off in November. Now, this Senate race is one of the most expensive we've seen thus far this cycle. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff is considered the frontrunner. He's facing off against 2 fellow House progressives, Katie Porter and Barbara Lee. The most well-known Republican in the race is Steve Garvey. He's a former Major League Baseball player. Meantime, another Senate primary to watch in Texas. Republican Senator Ted Cruz seeking his 3rd term. Favored to win in the Democratic primary, Congressman Colin Allred, a former NFL linebacker. We're also watching a heated governor's race taking shape in North Carolina. Running in front on the Republican side, the state's first black lieutenant governor, the far-right Trump acolyte, Mark Robinson. In the Democratic contest, State Attorney General Josh Stein is leading the way in endorsements and in fundraising as well. And finally, some important congressional primaries we are watching, including a rare allies turned rivals race in Alabama. Because of redistricting, 2 incumbent Republican congressmen are clashing head-to-head. And back in California, voters are deciding the top 2 candidates to fill House seats held by former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Congressman Adam Schiff. Notably, among the candidates for Schiff's seat, a 90s sitcom star, Ben Savage from Boy Meets World. One of the key questions I have tonight, Jake, where's Topanga?
All right, we're on the brink of the first significant round of results once voting ends in Virginia and in Vermont just minutes from now. It is the busiest night yet of the primary season, and it might be a defining moment in the fight for the White House. Don't go anywhere. We'll see if we can project any winners after we sneak in this quick break. It is Super Tuesday, and we are closing in on the first significant results at the top of the hour. You're looking right now at a gorgeous shot from Richmond, Virginia. The top of the hour is when polling places close in Virginia and Vermont. That's just a few minutes from now. A total of 65 Republican delegates are on the line in these 2 contests, most of them in the Commonwealth of Virginia, not far from where I'm standing. Donald Trump and Nikki Haley both campaigned in Virginia in the final lead-up to tonight's primary. Haley is eyeing the Commonwealth of Virginia as a place where she might be able to peel away votes and delegates from Trump. Virginia is key, of course, to President Biden's efforts to hold on to the White House in any potential rematch with former President Trump. The Commonwealth went for Biden in 2020 and has voted blue in every presidential election since 2008. But it has a Republican governor. It is a purple state. Let's check in with Jessica Dean, who's at a polling place in Richmond, Virginia. Jessica, tell us what's going on there as voting is about to end.
Yeah, we're just right up on the deadline here, Jake. I've been talking to voters all afternoon, and one theme that I hear again and again, Democrats who are voting for Nikki Haley as a way to protest against Donald Trump, and also people who perhaps voted for President Biden in 2020 who consider themselves independents voting for Nikki Haley. They really want to see somebody else in there. But one man told me, look, I'm probably going to go back to Biden if it's Trump versus Biden. But more and more we heard from people who said they're typically Democratic voters, but they wanted to try to support Nikki Haley in this instance because President Biden, and they didn't feel like needed their vote in this moment, that they could protest vote against him. So about 250,000 people early voting so far here. A few more Democrats you'll see there over Republicans. But Jake, what my big takeaway from talking to voters, everybody has their very own specific reason for why they were voting for who they were voting for. Top issues, immigration, abortion, the economy. That's what I heard again and again.
All right, Jessica Dean in the Mecca, Richmond, Virginia. Thank you so much. Now, it's true that there are a lot of different kinds of people turning out to vote, and David Chalian is digging deeper into our exit polls from Virginia. And David, what are you learning from the exit polls about who actually makes up the electorate?
Exactly. The different components of this Virginia Republican presidential primary electorate could give us insight here. If you look at party ID, this is how people identify. 60% say that they identify as Republican. Now remember, it's a nonpartisan, there's no party registration in Virginia, but 60% of voters in the Republican primary identify as Republican. 30% independent, 11% Democrat. Democrats voting in the Republican primary. Now, this is not quite as many independents as we saw in New Hampshire, but it is some opportunity there, you would imagine, for Nikki Haley. Take a look also at the breakdown of urban versus suburban and rural. By far, suburbanites are showing up in big numbers. 72% of the electorate from suburban areas, 18% urban, 10% rural. On the question of race, it is an overwhelmingly white electorate in the Republican presidential primary in Virginia, 87% white. And you could see every other race that we've got there is in single digits. And then finally, the great dividing line in American politics, college educated versus non-college educated. This Republican primary electorate in Virginia is roughly split in half. 52% are college graduates, 48% are non-college voters, and that too, having 52% as college graduates, would seem like opportunity, Jake, for the Haley campaign to go fishing for votes.
Very interesting, David Chalian. And, you know, the Commonwealth of Virginia is an incredibly important, it's not just a primary this evening. It's going to be where a lot of money is spent in November.
Maybe. This is the fascinating question you raised. You mentioned it's a purple state. It is a purple state. It has a Republican governor. It had a Republican legislature, but the Republican governor lost last year, remember, when he tried to win the two chambers of the legislature. Said the Democrats won them both. But it's been 10 years. George W. Bush was the last Republican to carry Virginia for president 10 years ago. So is it a purple state? Is it a presidential battleground state? If the map expands, if we are talking about Virginia, come September, October, November, Joe Biden's in trouble. Let's just go back and look at it. You go back and look at this state right here. I mean, he won the state by 10 points, right? Barack Obama won it by 5. Hillary Clinton won it by 5. Joe Biden won it by 10. So if we are talking about Virginia after the conventions this year, that tells you the map is expanding in a way that is not good for Joe Biden. So it's fascinating to watch. And so what are you looking for there? You're looking at the suburbs, of course. The suburbs of what has changed Virginia. George W. Bush won up here. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden wins. This is Trump country. That conversation with Jessica Dean, and I think it was Diane Gallagher before that, with Democrats who turned out to vote for Nikki Haley, to vote against Trump, is fabulous. Because if you're thinking strategically, you're not a Democrat to go out to keep Nikki Haley alive. She beats Joe Biden by more than Donald Trump in the national polls right now. People vote their passions. So people are showing up doing what is actually not the best thing for Joe Biden. Voting for Nikki Haley to keep her alive, even though you might go back to Biden. That part is fascinating. So can Nikki Haley do it? Can she surprise us? These are her best states. If you move more west, you get more rural, you get more Trump, your state gets less educated. This is a state where you have the more affluent population, you have a more college-educated population, you have a big suburban population. Virginia is a growing suburb. That's why it has become so Democratic in recent years. So if Nikki Haley can do it, this is where it would happen. If you just look at the 2016 Republican primary, you see that lighter red just in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. That's Marco Rubio. You see the darker red down here. That's Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump's wheelhouse. Blue-collar former Democrats in small-town and rural America. This is what he does. He runs it up. Just pick a county, and you go through these states. Need to turn that off to do it. Just pick a county, and you turn it up 35% there. You move more rural, and he goes up as he goes. And then you get to a general election. You watch these counties in a general election in the presidential race. That's what happens. Donald Trump will run it up in small-town rural Virginia tonight, Jake. The question is, if Nikki Haley has any hope of being able to call her donors up late tonight and tomorrow and say, let's do another week, let's do more, it has to happen here. I would not go to Vegas on that. Demographically, it's a state where she could make a statement. Can she beat Donald Trump? Can she beat Donald Trump? The map tells you so far, most unlikely.
All right, John, we are just moments away from the first major poll closings on this Super Tuesday, where voting ends in Virginia and Vermont in just 7 seconds, with a combined 65 Republican delegates on the line. So let us get now a key race alert. It is right now in the states of Virginia and Vermont too early to call in the Republican presidential nomination. CNN does not have enough information right now to call the Virginia Republican primary or the Vermont Republican primary. In both of them, it is too early to call. We can make this early projection based on exit polls that CNN and other news organizations conducted with voters in the Virginia Republican primary. In a second, but first we're going to talk about the Virginia Democratic primary. The winner is Joe Biden. CNN can project that Joe Biden will win the Democratic primary in Virginia. Now let's talk about those exit polls, because we are now given the information, now that the polls are closed, about what we know in the exit polls. David.
Yeah, Jake, we can start looking at how Trump and Haley voters split here. So are you part of the MAGA movement? Now, this is only a third of the electorate. 32% say yes in Virginia, but Donald Trump wins them overwhelmingly, as you would expect. It's his movement. 94%. Haley only wins 3% of this third of the electorate that identifies as part of the MAGA movement. Let's see where else Donald Trump runs up the score here. Among very conservative voters, 28% of the electorate, Donald Trump, 86% to Nikki Haley's 12%. If we take a look at the non-college educated voters we were just talking about, it's roughly half the electorate. 48% of voters are non-college educated. Donald Trump wins 3/4 of them, 73% to Nikki Haley's 24%. And then if you look at immigration voters, which, by the way, 37% of the electorate, nearly 4 in 10 say it's the most important issue to their vote. Donald Trump wins immigration voters nearly 3-1, 72% for Trump. Nikki Haley gets 26%, Aaron, of those voters who say immigration is their top issue.
These exit polls from Virginia are fascinating. And, Scott, it is big, and they're different. They're very different. I mean, it was an interesting point that David was making, that you don't have to register for a party in Virginia, but among how people describe themselves, you are looking at an electorate that's more than 40% independent and Democratic today.
Oh, yeah. And they're gonna love Nikki Haley. This state's not going to model out as well for Trump as some of the more, just some of the data we've seen out of North Carolina already. You can see the differences.
Huge differences,
in those states. But this is also sort of a larger conversation about what we're going to be talking about all year. People with college degrees, living in suburbs, used to be pretty reliable Republicans. What are they doing? And then these working class voters, used to be reliable Democrats. A lot of them don't have college degrees. Coming. This is the defining issue of the realignment of these two parties, and we're seeing it play out tonight in these primaries.
But also, just like the reinvention of these parties by Donald Trump, 83% of people who say they're very conservative are supporting Donald Trump. What is conservative about Donald Trump? Abandoning Ukraine to Putin? That's conservative. Isolationism. Where's the law and order? Conservatives, when you got somebody with 91 felony counts. In other words, this guy has completely rewritten what it means to be a conservative in a way that's not even recognizable.
I just think, look, I think what people are looking at is they're using Joe Biden's, don't judge me against the almighty, judge me against the alternative. So they're looking at Joe Biden and saying Trump's, That's what they're comparing themselves to, right? And the shift you're talking about, Scott, I think that's, it is the new kind of the story that's going to be told for the next 244 days. But it began during Reagan. That has been slowly ebbing, slowly fading. Yeah. When I worked for Spectre, we kept losing, right, kind of college-educated white suburban voters as a Republican in the Philly suburbs. And we kept picking up more folks where I grew up in Beaver County, Western Pennsylvania, used to be Democrats. So that slide has been going on for quite some time.
I think it's not all economic either, in my opinion. It's
cultural.
It's cultural.
Yeah.
And what is conservative about Donald Trump? He is the one guy who's promising to stand up against this. In their mind, this progressive cultural hellscape that they don't even understand. That is the issue.
He's anti-liberal, but he's not conservative. And that's the thing. We now have a negative partisanship that is running, I think, both parties into a ditch. But he's not conservative. He's anti-liberal. He's not conservative.
So one of the interesting things, among all the demographics that you're rattling off, probably the one that is most troubling to the Biden campaign and the most important in this race is Trump is consistently getting between 20 and 25% of African Americans. Yeah. Biden won 88% of that vote in their last match. Trump is even or ahead among Hispanic voters. Biden got 2/3 of those voters in the last race. I don't know if there are enough college-educated white voters in the suburbs to replace those, and he's got to get some of those back.
No question about that, no question. But I also think these numbers show how much Donald Trump motivates people to come out and vote him, right? I mean, you got, it's like 12% Democrats in a Republican primary coming out to vote. Presumably they are not voting for Donald Trump, although I suppose we'll see. So the great thing about votes, right, is somebody who thinks Joe Biden's done a great job. My vote for Joe Biden will count the same as somebody who says, I don't want Donald Trump to be president. And at the end of the day, building a winning coalition is about getting as many people under the tent as possible.
It's addition, right? It's addition.
These guys are codependents, okay? They both have issues, and they're counting on each other to help organize those reluctant voters who they need in their own camp, and we'll see how that goes.
So, by the way, I think something that the Biden campaign may miss big picture is that a lot of Trump supporters think of the Trump term in office as pre-COVID. They think of record stock market gains. They think of, border crossings being down, USMCA and these achievements. And those who've turned against him basically think of the COVID period, the economy crashing, everyone in lockdown, the chaos of the social justice protests of that summer. And they have to be able to message to people who say, my life was objectively better for 3 of the 4 years of Donald Trump than it is now economically. And that is where I worry that you're going to lose some of these maybe Nikki Haley voters that really don't want to be with Donald Trump, but they're ultimately going to vote with their pocketbook.
The thing you didn't mention was the insurrection in your litany of things about the Trump years, and that's kind of extraordinary, and we shouldn't lose sight of that fact that this guy left the Capitol in disgrace. He's currently indicted for some of those activities, and yet he is a colossus among at least Republican voters here.
But if you take the fact that a lot of these voters think Joe Biden didn't legitimately win, I don't believe this. It was a disgrace what happened, and it should be a determinant in the election. Yeah, but if you don't think Joe Biden legitimately won, you may be okay with that.
That's true.
Yes, and also we've seen in every election since 2020, voters have turned out and been motivated by this issue of democracy. I mean, we don't have to theorize about this. We saw it in 2022.
But again, Donald Trump was on the ballot there so much. And listen, I think, again, when you talk about January 6th, what does that say? Everybody watched it. Everybody knows what happened. What does it say? That Donald Trump is still going to be the nominee and still ahead of Joe Biden every poll.
What does it say? What does it say about us?
What does it say about America? Right. That's what I'm saying. That they say that Biden is doing so terribly, we're willing to accept a flawed candidate.
Van, I'm curious, though, also when you look at the exit polls here, and we'll see what the actual votes are in Virginia. But, you always hear about, there's 7 states, 7 states that matter. These are the swing states. And Virginia's not on that list when you go through. And all of a sudden you look at Virginia, which had become a red state, at least presidentially in recent years. That's not what you're seeing.
Well, I mean, right now, there's trouble in the Democratic coalition. That's true. But I think there's more danger for Trump. If you look at Virginia, of course, Trump's not going to win Virginia. So you got to look there and see what can you learn. The suburbs do not like this stuff. The insurrection has not been forgotten by a lot of people. There are a lot of people who are turned off. Not only turned off, they're terrified by what Trump did then and what he continues to do. And the fact that you have this steamroller that's already told you he wants to be a dictator. He's already told you that he doesn't even respect our institutions, who seems to be in the pocket of Putin. That is motivating people in the suburbs. And even though Virginia is not a swing state, this election is going to be won and lost in some swing counties that look a lot like those counties around.
Right, yes. And by the way, so is abortion, which was a dominant issue in 2023 in Virginia, where these same voters in the suburbs rejected the Republican position. So don't forget, that is going to be a huge factor in this race as well.
Prediction. It'll be on the map by the fall. I think the Republican Party will put Virginia on the map. I don't know if we're going to win it, but I'm just telling you, I think it's going to.
Put down your books, people.
I don't think you believe that.
Put down your books, people. Listen, I think. Unless a part of Virginia secedes from the other parts.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Let's not start using the word secede. You know what? That may not be that far from reality. All right. All stay with us. Jake.
All right. We have a key race alert for you now. Actual votes are coming in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And right now, with this trickle coming in, Donald Trump is ahead with 72.2% of the vote. That's 854 votes. That's 548 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 25.9% of the vote. This is scarce. Scarcely 1,000 votes have come in, but they have come in. So we are telling you, good people, about them. John King, where are these votes coming in that show Donald Trump with a very small number of votes that have been counted in the lead?
But every vote counts, and that's the magic of election nights. We get to count them. You're right. It's way too early to say anything from this. 48 delegates at stake in Virginia, and he's up 854 votes to 306 votes. The interesting thing is they're coming in from all over the place, which means different places are starting to report in different parts of the state. Only down here in Norfolk, this is the only semi-major population center where we have any votes, and we have 200 votes. So again, let's not rush. Let's not rush anywhere with this. But this is 7th of the 133 counties, so a semi-significant population center. Most of the other places where you're seeing votes are really tiny communities. This is right along the southern border with North Carolina, 92nd population-wise of the 133 counties, so it's down there. But that's why it's 16% of the vote, right? You're not going to get a ton of votes here in Brunswick County. But this is just a test for Donald Trump. Are your people coming out? When that is one of your challenges. If you look at all the prior contests and you're a Republican voter, you're a Trump voter, you think he's marching to the nomination. If you're having a busy day, do I go? Do I vote? So Trump voters do tend to come out. I do think for all we focus on, can Haley turn out in the suburbs? What about the uncommitted vote against Biden in a couple of states tonight? Trump voters are motivated. Even when he's won 6, 7 in a row and he's on a march, they're coming out. And that's a testament to him, like it or not, that his people come out and they're committed. Buckingham County, again, these are tiny pieces of the vote. But it does tell you, here we're starting to move some votes up here. You move up to Loudoun County. This is a much bigger test up here. One of the fastest growing counties in America, not just in the Commonwealth of Virginia. 4th largest of the counties. Joe Biden won this county by 25 points. Last time you were here, I think I said it was 10 years. I misspoke. George W. Bush was 20 years ago. The last time a Republican won Virginia for president was 20 years ago, in 2004. So is it a competitive state again? Yes, it has a Republican governor. The legislature's gone back and forth. It's Democratic right now. For president, this Commonwealth has told us for 20 years now, since 2008, Barack Obama's first win, we vote Democrat. So one of the things as we watch tonight, how strong is Trump? What does Haley do in the Commonwealth of Virginia? Is there any signs that because of Biden's early weaknesses in the race, because of inflation, his approval rating, that the Republicans somehow could stretch the map? Most campaigns would tell you, don't waste your resources, focus on the 5 or 6 states we think are going to settle it. But a bigger map, if you have the fundraising, is a strategic advantage if you can contest some places. As we are standing here, you see more votes coming in. You see some tiny votes coming in for Haley. Let's just come down here. This is the city of Fredericksburg. Again, it's 0.3% of the state population. So, but if you're Nikki Haley, you're trying. It's a suburban area. You're trying to see there, and you see some others down here. Roanoke, which is a city area here. This is Roanoke City. In the city of Roanoke, 177 to 163. Very, very early returns. But if you're at home and you're thinking, is Trump just going to march, or is Nikki Haley going to find at least 1 or 2, 3 more places, 5 more places to put up a fight? This is one of the potentials. We'll watch as the results come in. Trump has weaknesses in the suburbs. Trump has giant strengths in so many rural counties here in Virginia. So if you're sitting at home saying, is the Republican race over tonight? Vermont and Virginia will give us very early clues on the East Coast.
Very interesting stuff. Let's go now to Kristen Holmes, who is in Palm Beach, Florida, at the Mar-a-Lago Resort, where the former president, Mr. Trump, is following tonight's results. Kristen, polls obviously just closed in Virginia minutes ago. How does the Trump team view how things are going in Virginia?
Well, really, they're looking at Virginia as setting the groundwork for a potential 2024 rematch with President Joe Biden. He was there last weekend. Of course, it is a state that is in Super Tuesday, but it also is a way for them to see exactly where the enthusiasm is. I'm told by a senior advisor that they are looking to see if the blue-leaning state could come into play. Now, to be very clear, and this goes to exactly what John was just saying, this is not a tier one for them. This isn't the top flight of states that they want to flip or that they're going to invest resources in. It is something they're looking at, and they do know that it would likely be very, very expensive. So the big question becomes how many resources or how much of your resources do you want to pour into the state that could be used in a more high profile or high priority battleground state. But that being said, they do believe, and this also goes to what John was saying, that they don't have an enthusiasm problem, that Donald Trump voters are motivated and they will come out. And if Biden's support is dampened, that there is an opening there for the former president in Virginia. And the other thing to note here is that there is somebody on the campaign who is very interested in the state, and that's the co-campaign manager, Chris LaCivita, who is a Virginia Politico, who has run several campaigns in the state, and likely someone they would lean heavily on when it comes to Virginia.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks so much. Dana?
Thanks, Jake. And, you know, when Kristen was talking and looking at some of the votes coming in, I'm reminded of what you were saying earlier, Abby, about the Biden campaign, kind of the flip side of that conversation. The Biden campaign insisting, I talked to a source earlier, said something similar, that their voters, the parts of the coalition that they're worried about, some of them are low information voters, meaning they're just not paying attention because they're living their lives, unlike us who are living this every single day. And once this becomes more clear that Trump really is going to be the nominee, places like Virginia, they hope, they believe, will be less competitive.
That's the theory of the case, and they've been saying that for a while. The Biden campaign, they know that this is not going to be a cakewalk. The biggest challenge Joe Biden faces, showed up in the New York Times poll from over the weekend, he actually has to bring back his voters. Some of those people are not jazzed about voting for him. Some of them are not thrilled. Maybe they're very medium about how things have gone over the last 3 years. Maybe they feel like it's had no effect on their lives one way or another. Joe Biden's job over the next 9 months is to bring those people back into the fold, whether it happens now or it happens right before election year. The other thing that they have to deal with is what Alyssa was saying in the New York panel, which is that voters looking back on Trump have a very rose-colored view of the Trump years.
They call it amnesia.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the numbers, and it's over 70% in a recent poll say that they're better off or they're about the same as a result of Donald Trump's policies. That number for Joe Biden is more like 57%. So it's a huge differential, and some of that is just the passage of time. And the Biden campaign's job, they know, is going to have to be not just to remind voters of, you know, who Trump is, the indictments, all of that, but also just to kind of remind voters of the reality of what they think the Trump years were about. And that's going to be very challenging.
And I think what we saw... Go ahead, Audie.
I was just going to say, they're also dealing with the reality of their lives right now. I mean, you were talking to Elizabeth Warren earlier, and the thing she was touting from the Biden policies was like insulin, student loans, which are great, but not really ideal for people who find their car insurance, credit cards, home insurance is all up. Because the
can't buy a house.
Yeah, because the one tool you have to fight inflation is the one tool that makes interest rates high.
And I think that's a good point. And I think when Abby's talking about amnesia that these voters have, or maybe they don't remember because there's not the Trump tweets coming out every day. He's not from the White House every single day. You know, he was just in Richmond a few days ago, and I was looking at his remarks. And, you know, sometimes we see what former President Trump says yesterday after the Supreme Court ruling comes out. And instead of touting his victory, he's talking about his immunity claim and saying that he has broad immunity. When he's in Richmond at this rally, he's not talking about that. If you look at his remarks, he's talking about immigration and crime. That's what he's leaning into. And that may be appealing to those voters. And so I think you also have to think of what Trump they are seeing. It may not be the same kind of Trump.
And it's a very pithy argument. It's richer, safer, more confident. That's what he's saying.
But the question remains, are voters even seeing it yet? I think you could safely argue right at this moment, they're still not there yet. We still have so much time
And what
to
does
go.
Glenn Young can do? You know, that's someone that Trump didn't even mention. He is not someone who's endorsed Trump yet. He's not on the Republicans, the dozens that Trump has rolled out. It's all just the factors. And you see in these key states, those small things make a difference.
Okay, we are standing by for more votes from Virginia. We're also nearing another very important rally round of results when polling places close in North Carolina. Voters in that state are not only shaping the presidential race right now, they could play a decisive role in November. We'll talk about that after a break.
CNN can now make a major projection. CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the Republican presidential primary in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We can make this early projection based on exit polls that CNN and other news organizations conducted with voters in the Virginia Republican primary after they cast their ballots. Again, CNN is projecting that Donald Trump will win the Virginia Republican primary. The big question, of course, John King, how did he do it? This is an early call for a Commonwealth that we thought Nikki Haley and the Haley campaign, we should note, thought that they might have some strength in.
Number one, he used what has been his traditional building block since 2016. You see all that red. Most of those are small rural counties where Donald Trump, small town America, farm town America, working class, small factory America. Donald Trump runs it up. He has since 2016, and he's doing it again in the 2024 primaries. And here's the fascinating question going forward. Again, as we've talked about every primary night, Donald Trump is showing remarkable resilience, especially given all the criminal indictments and all the controversy around him, January 6th et al. Remarkable resilience, and he's on a march to the nomination in one of the states that demographically was one of Haley's best chances tonight. Donald Trump has now won that state. This is Loudoun County, one of the fastest growing suburbs in America, not just in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and he's holding his own. He's beating Nikki Haley right now. Joe Biden won that county by a boatload back in 2020. This is the test. Can Donald Trump improve his standing in the suburbs? Doesn't have to win the suburbs, but he has to be more competitive in November. That was the key to Biden's victory in 2020. So we'll see. That's about a third of the vote. Really interested to see, number one, the Republican turnout, number two, the final numbers here. You pull it back out. Again, if you don't like Donald Trump, you don't like what you're seeing here, but as a student of the process, that's impressive. We're also, though, are seeing some patterns. You see a tiny dot here. This is the District of Columbia on the north side of the Potomac River. This is Arlington, right here, Arlington County, one of the more liberal counties in northern Virginia, right? So if these Republicans, it's not a ton of votes. It's not a ton of votes. But if these Republicans are voting for Nikki Haley, where do they go in November, right? I'm suspect. I know people are saying Virginia is going to be a battleground state again. It's been 20 years. So you mark me down as dubious, right? I follow the demographics. I follow the map. I follow voting patterns. But Georgia's now a battleground state. It wasn't before. Arizona was. Can you pull Virginia back? Well, what do these voters? Let's go knocking on doors. Let's drive across the river right now and knock on these doors. Are you going to be for Biden in November? Or even though you voted for Haley tonight, are you going to vote for Trump? Again, Donald Trump is not going to win Arlington County. No Republican is going to win Arlington County in November, but you win close races on the margin. See this tiny dot right there? Another pattern we're seeing. Charlottesville. That's where the University of Virginia is. Where has Nikki Haley done well? College towns. College town. Younger voters, Republicans, some Democrats and independents in a state where you don't have to be, like Virginia. You don't have
cities in general.
Right. Urban areas in general. So it's a strength for her. It is by no means enough. Look at all that red, but you heard Kristen Holmes talking about how happy they are in the Trump campaign. They should be. They should be. They're winning state after state after state after state, and they're running it up. But they don't like to talk about this publicly. If they're smart, and there's a lot of smart people around Donald Trump, again, like them or not, they're studying the yellow. Who are those people? They're just voting for Nikki Haley now. Where are they going to be in November? That's the biggest challenge as we watch the map, and this continues to fill in. And we have our first votes in Vermont as well tonight. And again, 1% of the vote. Less than 800 votes there if you add it up, a little more than 800 votes if you add that up there. And we got a long way to go, but you're starting to see, again, this Donald Trump, we've now projected, wins Virginia. If you're Nikki Haley and you're looking for a win on 50 State Super Tuesday, that's your best option left on the map.
Yeah.
We'll watch as they come in.
Can you put back on Virginia for 1 second?
Sure.
So one of the things that's also interesting in terms of what you're pointing out, you're saying that the Trump campaign will be looking at the yellow, the Nikki Haley areas, and figuring out, are these people going to come home and vote for me, Donald Trump, in November or not? The other person looking at them, Joe Biden.
Absolutely.
The Joe Biden campaign. How can we get those Republican voters? Probably not as difficult in Arlington County, but outside Roanoke, outside Richmond, Charlottesville.
Right here. This is one of the biggest swing counties. Yeah. When Glenn Youngkin won the governorship, it's because of his strength in the Richmond suburbs. So he took it back to the Democrats. So down here in Henrico County, again, yes. So you're asking these people right here, if Nikki Haley wins this tonight, Donald Trump's campaign will be fine. They will find them. They're smart. You run a data operation. You find them and say, please come home. Yeah. They're not going to say that tonight. They just voted for the opposition. And look, it just switched. While we're here, this is why I love this on election. Yeah. It just switched. But again, she's still getting 40% in a key swing county. So whether it's 40% at the end of the night, whether it's 38% at the end of the night, Haley voters will be the aggressive target of both campaigns. Joe Biden has other issues with his own base, But if you can get, Nikki Haley's getting, 25%, 30%, 40% or higher in some of these states. It'll be fascinating to watch if that continues as we move west, as the polls continue to close. You see all these lighter gray states? That's all the counting we have left to do tonight. So it's pretty clear Donald Trump's going to be the Republican nominee. Let's keep an open mind, but the map doesn't lie. The question is, if her numbers continue to be, whether it's a third or whether it's 40% or more, where do they go in November? That is the biggest question on the board.
Let's go to David Chalian now, who's pouring through the exit poll results in North Carolina as voting is taking place. Oh, so let's go to Diane Gallagher. I'm sorry, Diane Gallagher. Tell us what's going on where you are.
Yeah, Jake, polls close in about 2 minutes here in North Carolina. A couple people still waiting in line. They will get to vote because they are all already in line by 7:30. I have some people who just finished voting with me. I have Tricia and David Johnson with me. They voted in the Republican primary. I'm going to ask both of you who you voted for at the top of the ticket for president.
I voted for Donald Trump.
I voted for Donald Trump.
Why did you vote for Donald Trump?
My most important reason is he is pro-life. I am against abortion, and that's like I'm a one-issue candidate, or one-issue voter, I guess you could say. Pro-life is important.
And yourself?
He supports my values. His values and mine align, and I appreciated what he did in his other 4 years of the presidency.
Thank you both so much for sharing your reasons for voting with us. Thank you for coming out and voting today. Jake, I'm going to send it back to you from here in North Carolina.
All right. Diane Gallagher in Cornelius, North Carolina. The polls are about to close in North Carolina. This is a potential battleground state. Maybe come November. Right. Joe Biden will be trying to compete. He narrowly lost in 2020. What are you going to be looking for in a few minutes when the polls close?
It's the same issue. I mean, they're neighbors, right? It's the same issue. So Donald Trump will run it out in the small rural counties. You see a lot more urban dots here. The research triangle around Raleigh-Durham, the college towns around Charlotte. One of the things you're looking for here is what has become the greatest dividing line in American politics, Jake, and that is college education. So you see the darker the purple there, that is the counties with the lowest education, meaning high school degree or less. The lighter counties, you see that's around the research trial, around the red cities, that's where you have people with a college degree or more. That, Jake, is the biggest dividing line in American politics right now. And so, again, what is Nikki Haley's final number? And then who can get those voters to come in November? Because as you look at the map fill in tonight, Vermont, we're getting votes. Virginia, we're getting votes. About to get them in North Carolina. Donald Trump's on the march.
Yep, voting is about to end in North Carolina. 74 delegates are on the line in the Republican presidential race. 2 seconds left, 1 second left. We have more projections to make right this second. CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the Republican presidential primary in North Carolina, defeating Nikki Haley in a potentially crucial battleground in the November race for the White House. And on that matter, we can also project that President Biden will win North Carolina's Democratic presidential primary. We can make these early projections based on exit polls and that CNN and other news organizations conducted with voters in the North Carolina after they cast their ballots. Kristen Holmes, CNN's Kristen Holmes, is at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, where former President Trump is tracking tonight's results. Kristen, North Carolina, obviously a key state for Donald Trump, not just tonight, but he wants to win it again in November.
Yeah, probably more important for him in November. Now, just keep in mind, in 2016, Donald Trump won by more than 3 points in North Carolina. 2020, by barely over 1 point. It is expected to be highly competitive come November, and that is why when I'm talking to these senior campaign advisors, they are telling me that they are looking carefully at this data tonight that comes out of this contest to try and decide where and how they should spend their money. It's going to be key for them in their strategy in this battleground state. Now, when you're looking at North Carolina, one of the things that this could pose a problem for Donald Trump is with educated voters. I want to read you this statistic here because we know that that's a problem for Donald Trump already. The percentage of the population with an undergraduate degree or higher is growing faster in North Carolina than in any other state. So that could be a problem for him. The other piece that they're watching is how do those suburban voters, particularly the suburbs of Charlotte and Raleigh, how do they turn out? How do they vote? Where are they headed? Where are their heads out? Because that is what they are going to try to see if that area, those areas, are where they should be pouring more resources into. Because as John said, they believe they're going to win the rural areas. They believe they'll win the rural areas in November. They're winning them now. But what about those suburban areas? Where is he with that?
All right. Kristen Holmes, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Kristen Holmes in Palm Beach, Florida. And you have to give the devil his due. Donald Trump having the night that he wanted to have, an early projection of Virginia. Bad news for Nikki Haley, who thought maybe that was a Commonwealth she could wrest away from Donald Trump. Dan.
Yeah, I mean, Jake, Virginia, North Carolina, these were two of the states we were looking at, obviously early because the polls close early. But in addition to that, because those used to be solidly red states, and now Virginia has been trending blue, and North Carolina in particular is one that I was just getting a text from a senior Republican saying that this could be a big problem for Donald Trump if, we're also looking at down-ballot races, if Mark Robinson, who is very Trumpy, maybe even more Trumpy than Trump, Trump is endorsed, when assuming that he wins the Republican primary for governor, that could be a very, very big factor in what we see in the presidential race as well.
It could motivate Democrats.
Definitely.
Absolutely. What's absolutely fascinating about these results, and we have seen this time and again in this primary season, is just almost a different universe that Haley voters are in than Trump voters. Yeah, a lot of Haley voters are Democrats. Some of them may be independents who are coming out to vote because they're concerned about Donald Trump. But still, I mean, one data point from the Virginia exit polls, 78% of those voters believe that Joe Biden won legitimately. Donald Trump, 95% of Donald Trump voters in Virginia, according to the exit polls, believe that Joe Biden did not win in 2020 legitimately. And that just goes all the way down the line. Today I talked to Carrie Lake, who's running for the Arizona Senate seat. She says that her race in 2022 was rigged. She said Donald Trump's election in 2020 was rigged because that is where Republican base voters are. But the question is the general election voters, and that is such a different calculus for these candidates, and these results show that.
It's so critical. And in North Carolina, you made exactly the right point. Mark Robinson is just symbolic of how divergent the Republican Party in some of these states, especially a state like North Carolina, is from the median gettable voter. And when the Republican Party in a state like North Carolina veers all the way to the right, that means that the results that we see tonight are not going to be what should tell the Republican Party how they should operate come November. That delta is so huge, it's going to be a problem. Diane Gallagher spoke to a voter tonight who said, there's absolutely no way I can have Mark Robinson as the governor of the state because he's so extreme. She's not the only one. There are going to be a lot of voters. We talk a lot about suburban voters, but voters who are just regular people who are not in either camp or another, who are going to shy away from the extremes. And while Trump is going to romp tonight in a lot of places, he's probably not getting the information that he needs to get about where he and the Republican Party need to be in order to get those all-important voters who are right there in the political middle.
Caitlin, you have some new reporting.
Yeah, well, we're just looking at all of this. You know, one factor of this and what the down-ballot races mean. How does this resemble maybe even the presidential race? The other big part of this, and the reason that Trump is ready to move on from the Nikki Haley aspect of this race that we're still talking about, is money and having to shore up his finances, because Biden does have a major advantage there when it comes to fundraising. They've already made ad plans for as far as August. They've already are looking ahead to that. That has been something that the Trump team has lamented for several weeks now because they haven't been able to. And one thing that Trump is doing, as you saw everyone behind Kristen Holmes there earlier at Mar-a-Lago, is he's been hosting donors at Mar-a-Lago today as he has real concerns about shoring up those finances. And we've just confirmed that one of the people he met with in recent days was Elon Musk, obviously one of the richest people in the world. We're confirming reporting from the New York Times. It's not clear that Elon Musk is going to donate to Trump, but it is notable that those are the steps that he's taking in these recent days, as he's less focused really on the down-ballot races and way more focused on his own personal finances and for his PAC.
Well, and his own, maybe not his finances, but his own legal troubles. He is hoping and looks like he'll be successful in the RNC and whatever little money they have left, and he has paying for his legal bills. The flip side is, Audie, that the president, Joe Biden, has been doing very well in the past 2 months, according to what the campaign is saying, in fundraising.
Which means there are a bunch of people who might think age is a problem and clearly want to help him. I know in the media we're sort of like, he's got problems, but people also vote with their finances. You know, one thing I noted earlier is you guys were talking, or we heard from a kind of litmus test voter who said, I care about immigration, I care about crime. I think for Democrats that's been a little bit tough. What is your litmus test? Outside of abortion, what do people talk about where they feel like no matter what, this is what I have to vote on? As their memories start to dim, or if they start to really feel that the judiciary is undermined in some kind of way, the democracy argument starts to wobble. And I think that for Biden, who really relied on that in the year that a Carrie Lake lost, that's going to be tough.
Yeah. Okay, Donald Trump has 2 wins under his belt so far tonight in Virginia and North Carolina, and there are many more races ahead as we barrel towards another rapid-fire round of poll closings in 5 states. More results coming up.
Welcome back. And CNN has a projection that we're going to make right now in the state of Vermont. In the Democratic primary, we project that incumbent President Joe Biden will be the winner. He'll be the winner of the Democratic primary in the state of Vermont. And now we have a key race alert for you. Looking at Republican votes in Vermont right now, we have them coming in with 3% of the estimated vote in. Donald Trump is in the lead. He has 54% of the vote, 1,231 votes. He is 262 votes ahead of former Governor Nikki Haley, who was endorsed by the Republican governor of Vermont. She has 42.5% of the vote. Very early now, 3% of the estimated vote. We also have another projection to make on a down-ballot race, the North Carolina gubernatorial primary. That's going to be a big race in November, the governor's race. Boris Sanchez has details on that. Boris?
Jake, of the 11 gubernatorial races that we are going to be watching in November, the North Carolina race for the governor's mansion is going to be among the most competitive. And now CNN is projecting that the Republican candidate in that race is going to be Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. Robinson is the first black lieutenant governor in North Carolina's history. He is endorsed by Donald Trump. Donald Trump actually calling him Martin Luther King Jr. on steroids. He does have a controversial record, though. Robinson has made disparaging remarks about LGBTQ plus people. Also, he has a streak of anti-Semitic remarks, even dabbling in Holocaust denialism. That will likely come up as we get closer to the general election. Let's take a look at the Democratic side of this gubernatorial primary in North Carolina. Right now, the Attorney General, Josh Stein, has the lead. He's leading by about 4,000 votes. He has the advantage when it comes to polling, when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to endorsements. The state's sitting governor, Roy Cooper, who's term limited, actually endorsed Stein. Right now, he holds the lead early in the evening, 4,356 votes ahead. Just 1% of the vote in right now, Jake.
All right, Boris, thanks so much. Let's go to David Chalian now, who has more exit poll results from the Tar Heel State, from North Carolina, after the polls have closed there. David?
Yeah, Jake, you can see why and how Nikki Haley lost this race to Donald Trump in North Carolina. So among Republican voters, which made up 62% of the electorate, Donald Trump is winning Republicans in this primary, 81% to Nikki Haley's 16%, a trend we've seen throughout the primary season. He just dominates with the party faithful. Among independents, which made up 34% of the overall electorate, a far smaller share than Republicans, you see here, Donald Trump even bests Nikki Haley with independents, 49% to 45%. Yes, she gets close with independents, but she needs to win independents if she's going to win some of these races. Among college voters, again, a 45% share of the overall electorate. This should be a place, as you see, where Nikki Haley gets substantial support, but Donald Trump still wins in North Carolina with college graduates, 51% to Nikki Haley's 45%. She doesn't overtake him there. Non-college graduates, where Donald Trump runs up the score, here you go, it's 56% of the overall electorate that are non-college educated voters. Trump wins 80% of them, and Haley only gets 15%. So, Aaron, Donald Trump wins big with the big shares of the electorate, and where Nikki Haley needs to overtake him, Donald Trump actually edges ahead of her there as well.
All right, David, thank you very much. Kate, looking at these exit polls, and we'll see as these final results come in here. Now, obviously, we're not making a call yet. This North Carolina was supposed to be the state the Democrats were going to get that foothold, and, that was going to be their edge into the South.
Well, look, I don't think we should write it off, for one thing.
Yep.
First of all, you saw the call for David Robinson, who's going to be the Republican gubernatorial candidate, obviously, in addition to what we heard about some of his choice language. He also has been incredibly extreme on abortion, no exception for rape, no exception for incest. I mean, really, language. And I think in a post-Roe environment, it's hard to look at what we've seen from elections and say, well, there aren't going to be people who are going to be turned off by that. And so that I do think that will be a factor here. I also think as Biden looks at building out his coalition, as we've talked about a little bit tonight, he's got to go out and rebuild support to 2020 levels with black voters. Obviously, if he can do that, that helps him tremendously in a state like North Carolina, which is a more diverse electorate. And then the other thing to remember is at the end of the day, presidential campaigns are about how you expend resources and how you force your opponent to expend resources. So, if the Biden campaign, even on the back of a Republican gubernatorial candidate who's very off-putting, can force the Trump campaign to play in North Carolina when they otherwise might not have, well, that's a good thing for Biden. And that's forcing the Trump campaign to spend down resources when, as we heard earlier, Biden is sitting on a money advantage already.
What do you see in these exits?
Well, in North Carolina, I would just point out Mark Robinson. We talk about diversity, diverse African-American nominee for the Republican Party. We've never elected one governor. We had a couple appointed, but again, it shows the commitment of the Republican Party, I think, to have more diverse candidates. He got more votes in 2020 in his race than Donald Trump got for president. He got almost the same number of votes as the current governor, Cooper. The Democrats are nominating a very boring person.
That was before Roe fell, though.
Josh Stein, and they're sort of neck and neck in polls coming into this. Robinson, Stein.
Everybody wants to write off Robinson and act like, I mean, the guy got votes. He got elected statewide. He got more votes than Donald Trump once before. And I have no doubt it's going to be competitive. But I think if Democrats are depending on putting North Carolina on the board on the back of a gubernatorial campaign, there's a lot. That's a total bank shot strategy.
Well, two things can be true. It may be, generally these things run downstream, not upstream. So the presidential race has a lot of influence downstream. But I would say this, Mark Robinson is the profile of the kind of candidate that went down for Republicans in 2022 because the things that allowed candidates to win the Republican Party made them unacceptable to a broader electorate. So, you can celebrate and stuff, but I wouldn't go to the bank on that.
I'm not celebrating. I'm just telling you what happened in 2020.
I mean, I just really wish I liked that guy a lot more than I do, but I don't like him. And it's very rare to elect any black governors, period. Republicans have never elected one. Democrats have done 3, 72, Douglas Wilder in Virginia. You did Deval Patrick, Axelrod in 2007.
In Massachusetts,
2006. And then Wes Moore, my great friend and I think a huge leader just last year in Maryland. That's every 16 years you get an elected black governor. So the idea you could have another elected black governor, first one from the Republican Party, a year later, should have me excited. And I am depressed and distressed and sad because he says horrifically bad stuff about gay people, calls them filth, says horrifically bad stuff about women who have been raped. He wants to force them to have the children of their rapists. He just says horrible things. And so, look, if you were a Tim Scott or someone like that, I'd actually be pretty excited tonight, but I'm actually distressed and depressed tonight by this guy.
Tim Scott will be vice president.
No, but one number to look at, stepping away from the governor's race here, is out of these exit polls, among Nikki Haley's supporters, 78% of them said they would not vote for the Republican nominee. Potentially. They're not going to commit to voting for the Republican nominee in November. And this is a partially open primary, but it's not a fully open primary in North Carolina. There are some glaring red general election signs for Donald Trump here. What he's going to have to do to try to get these Haley voters who are very dug in against him is not something he's proven the ability to do yet. I'm curious to see, are we going to see gracious remarks from him tonight that's trying to have some forward-looking, embracing message? I kind of doubt it. And even if he does that, he's going to step on it tomorrough. So there are some major red flags for him.
And so I think, look,
You're shaking your hand. Well, maybe the remarks will be gracious tonight.
Unsurprisingly, look, I think Donald Trump is, the story here is that he's way ahead. He's going to have over 1,000 delegates tonight. Next week on the 12th, he's going to wrap it up and go forward earlier than he did in 2020. He's on the move. It's the Haley part's in the rearview mirror at this point.
Well, only in getting her voters for the general election. No one's saying Haley's going to be the nominee, but if she has people saying they will not be with him, that is a problem.
I mean, something's troubling a fair segment of the Republican electorate. And it may be that the guy is under 4 indictments, led an insurrection, and so on.
Certainly bothers me.
All right. Jake.
Thanks so much, Aaron. We're going to get a lot more Super Tuesday results very soon as we head into the busiest hour of the night. At 8 Eastern, polling places close in Oklahoma, Alabama, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and Maine. A total of 211 delegates are on the line in the next round of Republican presidential primaries. Donald Trump is looking to sweep the deep red states of Oklahoma, Alabama, and Tennessee. Nikki Haley hoping to make inroads among moderates in more blue Massachusetts and Maine. This next round of primaries playing out in strongholds for both former President Trump and President Biden, offering new measures of their support in some of their safest states. We're also keeping an eye on Texas, where many, but not all, polling places will close at the top of the hour. It's the second biggest delegate prize of the night for Republicans. CNN's Ed Lavandera is at a voting site in El Paso, Texas. Obviously, the border, a huge issue there, an issue that Donald Trump has been talking about quite a bit for his entire presidential life. Ed, what are you hearing from voters?
Well, the immigration issue is what we've been hearing from Democrats and Republicans throughout the day. We're at one of the more popular polling sites in East El Paso, where you can see here in Texas you have to stay 100 feet away from the ballot box area where people are standing in line. So this is where you're seeing people campaigning, the volunteers with their campaign. But right now, Jake, what we're going to walk you through is basically a therapy session here with Luis, who is a long time, you've been involved in Democratic politics here in El Paso for a long time.
For about 16 years. Yes.
And not only, you told us a little while ago, not only does Luis not know who he's going to vote for, and you've got about an hour left,
yes.
You don't know which party primary you're going to vote in.
I'm not really sure at this point. I think there's been a lot of confusion in terms of this election, and I can say that because of all the border issues, it's this whole country is divided right now, and we don't know. I mean, there's a lot of voters right now that I think there's a lot of Democrats that are voting Republican this year, and I don't blame them. I think there's definitely an issue with the influx of immigration right now.
You voted in 2020 for Joe Biden.
I did.
And right now, you're just...
I'm undecided. I am undecided, just like a lot of these voters are, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can tell you that I'm not very happy as how this country is handling the situation with immigration.
When you told me you were undecided, I thought you meant you didn't know which candidate. I didn't know you were undecided as to which primary, Republican or Democrat, you were going to vote in. That's another level of undecided.
Yeah, that's another level of undecided, and like I said, I don't know which way I'm going to go, but I mean, it's. I guess we'll find out in an hour. Yeah.
You also told us you wouldn't tell us exactly what you did after, which is you're right. I don't judge it, but and what is it that you're think of this as cheaper than paying for a therapist? You can just work it out here on national TV. But what is it that that you're grappling with the most?
Well, there's the influx of immigration. I think that people are not handling it. I think that right now this whole country is divided, not even Republicans or Democrats. If I had a choice to vote Republican, I would have voted for this governor out of, the governor out of Florida. I think DeSantis would have been a very great president. I mean, I'm not too crazy about Trump right now, but if we have no choice, then...
All right. Well, all right. Good luck to you. He's got about an hour left to decide here, Jake. So, kind of a good capture of what many voters are dealing with here this year. Jake?
All right. El Paso, Texas. Ed Lavandera, thanks so much. And Dan and Bash, we see there, obviously, in Texas, the immigration issue is huge, but it is really an issue that is... been underlined and caught fire across the country. Governor Abbott sending migrants to other states, sending them to Denver, sending them to Chicago, sending them to Washington, D.C., sending them to New York City. Whatever you think of that as an action, it has been incredibly effective politically.
It sure has. As we talk about not just what's happening in Texas, but what's happening across the country, Manu, I know you've got some new reporting about the very important down-ballot races.
Yeah, and actually there's some in Texas, including Colin Allred, who is trying to take on Ted Cruz in November. He's a Democratic candidate. The question will be tonight whether he surpasses 50% to avoid a May runoff. Democrats are concerned that if he does not get there, it could be very expensive for him over the next couple of months, hurt their ability to pick up that Senate seat. Really only have 2 pickup opportunities in the map this cycle. So that's one big thing. The other thing is in California, 2 key races. David Valadao, one of 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump. Can he make it into the general election? If he does not, that seat could flip to the Democrats. And also Adam Schiff. He is running for the Senate. Also, California is the top 2 make it to the general election. He has tried to prop up the Republican in that race, not to have a Democrat against him in November, but that could have serious down-ticket concerns because if there is a Democrat versus a Democrat, that could potentially hurt Republicans in the fall. But if it's a Democrat versus a Republican, perhaps that could help Republican down-ticket in those House races. So many key things to watch.
And the jungle primary in California, which is what you're talking about, it should have occurred to me, but it didn't occur to me until you said it, and then I'm hearing from senior Republican about that as well. Adam Schiff's strategy to just run against a Republican, if they're the only 2 left, could hurt some of his soon-to-be former colleagues in the House.
And Katie Porter, who is also obviously in this race, has been incredibly critical of how Adam Schiff has done this. It is political and it is cynical, but he has been, boosting him. He's run more ads than he has run for himself, and now he is turning in the last few days of this race and said, well, I'm running against this MAGA extremist. Won't you please help me? Because obviously that's a lot more appealing to voters than running against 2 of his more progressive colleagues, Barbara Lee and Katie Porter. And Katie Porter has been very critical of it, but clearly it has also been effective for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's never. Recently, it's never a question about whether statewide a Democrat will win, but it's those key House races
Also,
that could decide the majority.
Jungle primary again. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just the top 2 vote getters,
Right,
and I think it's important in a time when we talk about consolidation of power that is partisan.
The other thing that's happening there is not new. Boosting the MAGA candidate is a strategy the Democrats ran actually quite successfully in the last midterm election cycle. I don't think we can rule out that we'll see a lot more of that this coming year because the whole ball game, frankly, is to amp up the concerns with what a Trump Part 2 could mean, not just for Trump, but everybody down ballot as well.
Okay. I'm going to kick it over to Jake, who is with John at the Magic Wall. Jake?
All right, and the vote is coming in Vermont, and John King, let's take a look at, we have not called Vermont yet, although we should note Donald Trump is having yet another dominating evening. We've already called Virginia for him. We've already called North Carolina for him. And what is it? It's almost 9. Pretty early yet. We have not called Vermont yet. He's still leading. Where's the vote coming in from?
You see the smattering of these towns, and you see some Haley yellow there. These little small townships. Most of them are tiny population centers. You just pop it up here. 133rd of the 255 towns in Vermont. So we're not seeing anything. The 3 biggest population centers are right here: Burlington, South Burlington, and Essex, right around Burlington, Vermont, here along the lake. Then you come down here. Rutland is another one. Montpelier down here. But we have nothing from the major population centers yet. So we need to wait on Vermont. If you look at it right now, 461 votes. So 52 to 45. If you round it, it looks like a healthy lead, but we need to wait on votes. The reason we're looking at it, again, if you come out to the full map, I don't want to distort the conversation. Donald Trump is on a path to the Republican nomination. The question is, can Nikki Haley make a statement by picking up a win tonight, or at least by picking up more delegates? This is where we are, Jake. You don't need to say a word. I mean, just the numbers speak for themselves, and the colors on the map speak for themselves when you look at how Donald Trump is doing, not only tonight, but cumulatively across the Republican primaries. But you're looking at Vermont just to see if Nikki Haley can make any kind of a statement about, that's a very different Republican Party in the Northeast, a near extinct Republican Party. And then we move to Maine and Massachusetts in the next hour, the poll closings there. Again, that's where you're looking. It's hard to find, especially in national office, Republicans from the Northeast anymore. When I started doing this, you had Chafee in Rhode Island. You had Republicans from Maine. You have Susan Collins, the Republican senator from Maine, who is the lonely Republican from the Northeast, still in Congress here. So we'll watch that play out in the next hour. But if you're the Trump campaign, especially in rural America, you're watching this. This was not one of your best states if you're Donald Trump in 2016. John Kasich came in right behind you in second place. More of a quirky place, more of a libertarian place, a lot of independents in Vermont. So we'll watch this one play out, Jake. But if you look at the big picture and pull it out, again, that's a lot of Trump red as we start to move into the busy hours of the night.
All right, and we are closing in on 8 p.m. Eastern when all voting will end in 5 states with a total of 211 crucial Republican delegates up for grabs. And we now have a key race alert. It is too early to call in the following states: Alabama, which has 50 delegates at stake, too early to call. Maine, which has 20 delegates at stake, too early to call. Massachusetts with 40 delegates at stake, too early to call. Let's look at Oklahoma. Oklahoma, 43 delegates at stake, too early to call. Tennessee, 58 delegates at stake, too early to call. Now let's look at some of the voting as they're actually coming in, actual votes. Back to the state of Vermont. Donald Trump still in the lead, 10% estimated vote in. Donald Trump has 51.4% of the vote, 3,601 votes. He's 456 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who has 44.9% of the vote. Again, that's with only 10% of the vote in, but still, at some point, we're going to see whether Nikki Haley is able to even make one stand in Vermont this evening, because her campaign thought maybe she was going to be able to at least make a stand of some sort in Virginia. We've already called Virginia for Donald Trump.
And you just teed up the states where we'll get votes in the minutes and then hours ahead. You don't have to follow politics every day like we do to think you're not expecting Nikki Haley to beat Donald Trump in Oklahoma. You're not expecting Nikki Haley to beat Donald Trump in Alabama. You're not expecting Nikki Haley to beat Donald Trump in Tennessee. So the question is, can she do anything tonight, again, to convince her donors it's worth staying on another Tuesday or another couple months and the like? At the moment, you see nothing. So you go back and look at the Vermont votes just again since you were here. No updates since you were here. You're watching a very tiny amount come in. You need them up in Burlington. You need them in Rutland. Montpelier is the state capital. Again, a more quirky state, a more independent-minded state, where, as you noted earlier, the Republican governor, who is no fan of Donald Trump, has endorsed Nikki Haley. The Republican senator, no fan of Donald Trump, Susan Collins, has endorsed her here in Maine. Does that matter anymore in politics? Is it enough? That's the big question, because one of the things, Donald Trump is now the Republican establishment. I think that's a fair statement, but he runs against that old Republican establishment. Anyone who had a title or was involved before he got here, he runs against them. And again, as you just look at the map and you pull it up, Jake, it's amazing. I just want to pop. We've already projected this, but you look at this, right? So we have a lot of votes to count still. We've projected this.
Only 2% of the vote has been.
Only 2% of the vote, but we have our exit polls, we have key precincts, so we're very safe and confident in our projection. But if you just look at this, it just gets you at the fundamental strength and then the glaring weakness of Donald Trump as we look ahead into the general election. So I'm going to pick a random, 80%, right? This is what Donald Trump does. Only 1% of the vote in, but watch. We'll come back at the end of the night. It'll be relatively close to that as you go through it. That's in a county there. So watch this. Let's just bring that back up. Let's bring Rockingham County back up. Let's come over here, and we're going to look at education, right? So only 26% of the people in that county have college degrees. When you have a non-college degree environment, people with a high school education are left, that is Donald Trump's wheelhouse. That is where he gets numbers that look like that, right? So let's move this down here for a minute. That's Rockingham County. Let me pull back out to the statewide map. You see the Haley yellow in these places, right? So let's pull up right here. We'll pull up Wake County, right? Look what just happened. She's getting nearly 57% of the vote. Look at the difference. The percentage of college graduates goes up to 64%, right? Hard to follow as I switch around. So I'm going to leave this up here. That's Wake County. I'm going to move over here to Durham County, right? Again, 59% of the people have college degrees. Nikki Haley winning with 57% of the vote. Then you move up, then just pick one here. Donald Trump's winning here with 81% of the vote. Look what just happened, right? The percentage of college degrees drops way, way down. It is the single biggest dividing line in American politics, period, right now. And we're watching that dividing line play out in a fascinating way in the Republican primaries, where Donald Trump is marching to the Republican nomination. But among voters with a college degree, a bachelor's degree or higher, who tend to live in suburban areas across America, he has a giant problem. And many of them were the Republicans who elected Glenn Youngkin governor of Virginia, George W. Bush, the last Republican before Donald Trump, elected president of the United States. Those are the kind of voters they are. But they are voting more and more Democratic in general elections. A lot of them are voting for Nikki Haley tonight. And again, as we watch Donald Trump's considerable strengths, and I do not want to understate them, they are many, as he marches here toward the nomination, he has some big holes. Big holes. And is North Carolina a battleground state? We'll see when we get to November. But a lot of people like that live in suburban Milwaukee, live in suburban Detroit, live where you're from, or in the collar counties around Philadelphia. There's a lot of voters just like that. And Donald Trump, for all his strengths, still has a glaring weakness with them.
Yeah, David Chalian, this is really interesting and important. Two things that we're looking at here. One, and most importantly, without question, the dominance of Donald Trump when it comes to the Republican primary field. As of right now, we have some votes in from Massachusetts, just a few, barely any. Right. But generally speaking,
you ever been to Norton, Massachusetts?
Sure, I've driven through it, I think.
You probably have.
But the complete dominance of Donald Trump when it comes to the Republican primaries, we've never seen anything like this in modern presidential politics, a non-incumbent. He didn't win the D.C. primary, but he's won every other contest. But, David Chalian, some red flags for the Trump campaign in the sense that Nikki Haley is winning areas of North Carolina. Even though she lost the state, we've already projected it, Nikki Haley is winning parts where the voters, a majority of voters, have a college degree.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And as John is saying, that college divide, normally you don't see the same kind of divide play out in a general election as you do inside a primary, but it speaks to the fundamental divide in the Republican Party, the Trump takeover of the party and where the party has moved in the Trump era. The divide between the Haley and Trump voters as it comes to the education level is the same kind of divide we're going to see between Joe Biden and Donald Trump come November. So you are getting a preview of that. I would just note, Jake, we are seeing in some of these North Carolina results the work that Donald Trump is going to have to do to bring some of that Haley support into the fold. Some of it will happen naturally, of course. They'll put on the R jersey in November and they will vote for Donald Trump. But you can see here, among people who say they're not part of the MAGA movement, okay, which is a significant chunk in North Carolina, Haley wins them, as you might expect, 50% to 45%. So I just take a look at that and say, okay, how much of that Haley 50% of those that don't identify with Trump's big political movement naturally comes to Donald Trump in November, and how much remains resistant where Joe Biden can go fishing for votes? We could do this sort of demographic by demographic in these primary results. Donald Trump dominating inside his party, but there are pockets of voters that we will be asking about for the next 8 months across these states as to what slice of these Republican primary voters remain so resistant to Donald Trump that they may actually be available voters for Joe Biden, maybe stay home, maybe vote third party.
And so to jump in and follow up, I want to go to the other map, to the 2020, come back to the 2020 presidential election to echo the point. So, Joe Biden has some bleeding problems too, right? Donald Trump has made inroads with Latino voters, especially males. There's some evidence he's making some inroads, modest inroads with African-American voters.
Especially African-American men.
African males as well. That matters in Milwaukee, that matters in Detroit, that matters in Philadelphia, that matters in Atlanta. I can go across the country in the battleground states. But to David's point about who can get there, can Joe Biden stop the bleeding in the Democratic base, and then who gets those Haley voters? You say, oh, why does that matter? Well, this was a good one. Joe Biden, 155,000 votes nearly here, 154,000 and change here. Of the battleground states, that was the big lead, right? Every vote matters. If you're bleeding those Muslim Americans who are mad at you, can you get the Haley voters? Well, look at the margin here. The other battleground states were so close. The other battleground states were so close in 2020 and also in 2016 that if Donald Trump is bleeding Haley voters, they're available to Joe Biden, that's enough to make up a margin in a place like that, 20,000 votes. You come here in a giant state, 7 million votes cast, almost 81,000 votes is your margin, right? In Pennsylvania, you go down to Georgia, it's 11,000 votes. And so close elections are won on the margin. So where do those Haley voters go? Can Joe Biden shore up the bleeding he has in the Democratic base? And I'll pose a question tonight that we can't answer tonight. We won't be able to answer for some time. In what states do which third-party candidates get on the ballot? In an election this close, I think that may end up being as defining a question as the education divide and the other divides in our politics. In what states or which candidates, from the third-party perspective, on the ballot?
Punch up the North Carolina map, if you would, John. I want to bring in Jeff Zeleny because he's been talking to people on the Biden campaign. Jeff Zeleny, what can you tell us about the Biden campaign? I'm sure this evening they're looking at North Carolina not just for the Democratic votes, but for the Haley votes.
Without question, Jake, and this is something that the Biden campaign has really been studying week by week in Michigan, of course, but particularly in North Carolina. And here is why. You look at the fast-growing suburbs around Raleigh, Wake County, around Charlotte, Mecklenburg County that John was just talking about there. And this is why the Biden campaign believes that North Carolina could offer promising ground for them in November. The margin of victory for Donald Trump shrunk considerably from 2016 to 2020. 2020 by some 74,000 votes. But those fast-growing areas certainly offer some promise. I was at a Nikki Haley rally just over the weekend in Charlotte talking to many of those voters, and it's remarkable to hear these conversations come alive. Many Republicans, we're not talking protest votes here, they say they simply can't vote for Donald Trump. Now, some say they also can't vote for Joe Biden. John was just mentioning third-party candidates. That came up again and again and again from Nikki Haley voters. They are just frustrated by the idea of a rematch here. So the Biden campaign at their headquarters in Wilmington and indeed at the White House, they are looking at these results very carefully. So even though the lessons for Nikki Haley, her supporters, may not help her candidacy, but we'll see how that goes, they certainly could be very telling. The Biden campaign is already opening a headquarters in Raleigh. They'll be opening others there. So the Trump campaign knows they will have to spend considerable money in North Carolina as well. But again, talking to a Democratic official there, they say, look, the area is growing in other places as well. Many people are moving down from Pennsylvania, other Northeast states. So it is a fascinating laboratory. That's what's interesting about every presidential campaign year by year. North Carolina now certainly part of that Sun Belt. We'll be watching this in November. 16 electoral votes. It certainly could be an insurance policy. Jake?
Jeff, I'm going to jump in. It's John King. I'm going to jump in quickly, and I'll get to Jake in a second. I just want to echo the point that Jeff is making there. Here you are, the research triangle. Here you are here. You come out, I'll just circle the Asheville area out here as well, and you look at, this is where Nikki Haley is doing well tonight. We'll see what the final results are, but this is where Nikki Haley is doing well tonight. North Carolina is probably the greatest demographic, education-wise, political parties, tug-of-war, one of the greatest states in the United States to watch a 50-50 tug-of-war. So you see the circles there where Haley's doing very well tonight. Then you go back to the 2020 presidential map. Overlaps, right? Those are the places Joe Biden won in North Carolina, even though he lost the state. So a Trump supporter might say, oh, well, they're just Democrats. No, they are Republicans, Jake. They're some Democrats, they're independents, but they are suburban voters who, if we were back in the day of George W. Bush, even George H.W. Bush, when Republicans won the suburbs on issues like crime, on issues like lower taxes, they're those kind of voters. But we have seen in recent years, since the Obama presidency, and especially in the Trump age, more money in their pockets, higher education level, they tend to vote Democratic, and they are voting for Nikki Haley tonight in North Carolina, and those are the very voters. Joe Biden, as Jeff said, lost by 75,000 votes, 74,000 and change in South Carolina, but that was a lot better than Hillary Clinton did 4 years before that. So we talk about, is Virginia back in play? I doubt it. Is North Carolina back in play? I doubt that too, except for that down-ballot governor's race. You never know. That's why these nights are so interesting.
All right, John King, let's bring you now a key race alert, because we are getting actual votes now from some of these commonwealths and states. In the state of Texas, 161 delegates at stake. Donald Trump is by far in the lead, 72.3% of the vote, 179,250 votes. That's 123,354 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 22.5% of the vote. That's 11% of the estimated vote in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where 40 delegates are at stake. Nikki Haley is, right now, with a very few votes in, just over 500, in the lead. She has 49.7% of the vote, 282 votes. That's 27 more than Donald Trump, who has 45% of the vote. That's 255 votes. That's just a few votes sprinkled in there. In the state of Vermont, Donald Trump, 17 delegates at stake. Donald Trump is in the lead, 51.2% of the vote. That is 5,535 votes. He's 630 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who has 45.3% of the vote. That's with an estimated 15% of the vote. That is still a lot of votes to be counted. John King, show me what we got in Texas, if you would. I see you have the Commonwealth of Massachusetts up there, but that's just about 500 votes. So yes. What do you got out of Texas?
Texas is a little bigger. We've got more than 200,000 votes already in Texas, and you're seeing it play. And again, no major population centers. If you look, you see Dallas, you see Austin, you see Houston, one of the fastest growing areas, if not the fastest growing area in the country. Ed Lavender was out in El Paso, San Antonio, Laredo. But you're looking up here, some of the Dallas suburban areas coming in, Collin County up here, Trump winning. That's a quick count, right? So you have a quick count in the state here. Donald Trump winning north of Dallas, Donald Trump winning Denton County here. This is a Trump state. We're not looking, but again, you're going to look for the same questions. What about the Dallas suburbs? What about Austin, which is a college town? It's a blue spot within the state of Texas? What about when you get down here to Harris County in Houston? Do you see the same things happening? But this is a giant. You mentioned second only to California when it comes to your batch of delegates, and it's an early lead for Donald Trump. And there is zero expectation. We'll count votes, as we always do. But the Trump people believe they have this one wired quite well, especially because you get later in the campaign like this. You're not spending as much time campaigning in these states. You're not spending as much money on television in these states. This is indigenous support, and Donald Trump's support in Texas is deep.
It is indeed. Nikki Haley with 22.5% of the vote. It's only about a tenth of the vote in. This isn't a state that she is particularly raising expectations on, although she did visit the other day. But in the same way that we're looking at other states to see where Donald Trump's potential weaknesses might be, and certainly we spent a lot of the night of the Michigan primary a week ago talking about Joe Biden's potential weaknesses. But when you're looking at Donald Trump's potential weaknesses, not over the state of Texas, but in terms of demographics, specific voters who might actually go for Joe Biden, even if they are Republicans, what parts of Texas are you going to be looking at?
Well, some Harris County votes just come in, so let's start here. Again, this is a giant, fast-growing county that has the city of Houston, but then the county has been stretched out. It's an incredible, diverse, very rich, diverse. There's a lot of, Republicans were mad about the drop boxes down here. This is one of the states Governor Abbott rolled back some of the COVID voting things down here. This was a huge battleground for voting rights in 2020. But it's one of the fast growing. So you've got an urban area here that will be solid blue. And then you have some suburbs where you have a fair amount of Republican voters. And so you watch how that plays out. About half the vote in there already. Trump, getting 77% if you round that up there in Harris County. But again, that's something we want to look at. Is Haley, and is in the places where Haley did not campaign as much or spend as much, where maybe there's not as much attention on the race, does she stay above 30? Or is she declining in these states? That the Trump campaign will make the argument, this is a Republican state and her number's lower if it stays like that. And that's their way to make the case that, careful with the fire alarms. Now, I make the argument, and I'll make it through November, suburbs in 2020 and 2018 in the midterm elections, the suburbs were Donald Trump's kryptonite, and we still see some evidence of his weaknesses in these primaries. So you keep making the case. But as they watch this happen, they'll look down here. Travis County is where Austin is. This is a Democrat. This is a strong Democratic stronghold. Doesn't mean there's not Republicans there. That's where the state capital is. So we'll look for that as more results come in Texas to see if in the urban areas does it pull down ultimately that percentage. Is Haley getting enough votes in places? Because I just said, there's a ton of Trump, especially in these small rural counties. I mean, if you go back, just take a look at the 2020 election. Democrats can win the cities and the close-in suburbs, even in a place like Texas. So you think it was a red state, but just look at that. I mean, this is what Donald Trump does. And when you go into these counties, this is the general election.
Right.
He's getting 77%. This is his foundation. It makes him an incredibly formidable candidate anywhere that has small town and rural America in it. So we come back to the here and now, and you bring it in. We're waiting for that to fill in. So I just showed you how he did in the general election last time. None of this is filled in yet. Most of that vote's going to him. The question is, again, in the suburbs like everywhere else, we have some Oklahoma. Oklahoma's another fascinating state. So many of these states demographically are changing. Oklahoma's a red state. Oklahoma is a red state. But Oklahoma County, where Oklahoma City is, if you go back in time, you come back here, it's Joe Biden, that's pretty close, right? That's pretty close. So there are a lot of Democrats in the Oklahoma City area here. So you watch this play out. Now we're back here. But you have, at the moment, you've total Trump red. So as he moves into the southern states and you move west, Trump is expecting not only to win, but to dominate. The challenge is, can Haley, again, let's just check on Vermont. It's close. As we get more votes in Vermont, it's close-ish there, so you keep an eye on that one. And then you come down here where she's leading in Massachusetts. But at the moment, it's just Norton and Provincetown. That's all we have out of my Commonwealth. Two very small communities have reported so far. And after tonight, we have the Commonwealth of Virginia. So what's left? We have Pennsylvania and Kentucky. But we'll focus on this Commonwealth for a little bit as we count the votes.
Yeah. All right. Donald Trump is dominating the early contests on the Super Tuesday with wins in Virginia and North Carolina just so far. We're standing by to see how he fares in a slew of other states. We're going to get an update on the key delegate count right now with another poll closing time just around the corner. So much more ahead. We're going to squeeze in a quick break. We'll be right back. It's Super Tuesday on CNN. We have another projection to share right now. CNN is projecting that Donald Trump will win the Oklahoma Republican primary. 43 delegates at stake. Donald Trump will win the Oklahoma Republican primary. That is the third one this evening that we have called for former President Trump. Let's take a look at all the states that Donald Trump has won to date. He has won Idaho, Iowa, Michigan, Missouri, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and this evening we projected that he would win the Commonwealth of Virginia. That is quite a romping for a non-incumbent presidential candidate. Let us now look at the Democratic primary in Oklahoma, where CNN projects Joe Biden, the incumbent president, will win with 36 delegates at stake. That is Joe Biden's latest victory this evening that we projected, in addition to victories in other Commonwealths and states. Let's go to North Carolina right now, because earlier Boris Sanchez noted a projection for the Republican nominee for the governor. There's a big governor's race, and you have some news on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, Jake, CNN is now projecting that North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein will be the Democrat in this race come November. Stein made a name for himself as Attorney General by suing the Trump administration multiple times on a variety of issues, including the environment. Stein has a big war chest, as well as the backing of the state's governor, Roy Cooper, who is term limited. This is a preview now as we look at the projection that CNN has made on the Republican side that Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson will be the Republican candidate in that race. This is a preview of what will no doubt be one of, if not the most competitive governor's race come November, Jake.
All right, Boris, thanks so much. Appreciate it. We have a key race alert for you now because we're getting actual votes in for some of these states that we have yet to call. In Texas, with 161 delegates at stake, Donald Trump is in the lead, 74.1% of the vote. That's 394,099 votes. More than 283,000 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 20.7% of the vote. That's with an estimated 24% of the estimated vote. About a quarter of the vote in from Texas tonight. In the state of Vermont, with 17 delegates at stake, Donald Trump is in the lead. It's close, but he's still in the lead. 48.8% of the vote with 9,244 votes. That's 211 more than Nikki Haley, who has 47.7% of the vote. That's with an estimated 27% of the vote in. In the state of Tennessee, with 58 delegates at stake, Donald Trump is in the lead with 80.6% of the vote. That's 25,112 votes, and that is 19,998 more than Nikki Haley, who has 16.4% of the vote. That's with only an estimated 4% of the vote in. In Maine, which should prove a battleground again in November, Donald Trump has 74% of the vote, 1,552 votes. That's about 1,000 more than Nikki Haley, who has about a quarter of the vote, 24.4% of the vote. There are 20 delegates at stake there. That's only 2% of the estimated vote there. And then in Massachusetts, with 40 delegates at stake, this is the one place where Nikki Haley is, at least as of right now, in the lead. 48.6% of the vote, 1,371 votes. That's 48 votes more than Donald Trump, who has 46.9% of the vote. Not a lot of votes in from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Let's take a look at Vermont now, if we can. Donald Trump just jumped ahead of Nikki Haley, 48.8% of the vote. He has 9,244 votes. That's 211 more than Nikki Haley, with 47.7% of the vote. That's 27% of the estimated vote. And let's go back to Vermont. She just jumped. Nikki Haley has 48.3% of the vote over Donald Trump. 48.3% of the vote. Nikki Haley just jumped ahead of Donald Trump. That's only 3 votes more than Donald Trump. That's 28% of the estimated vote. David Chalian, what are you guys getting in there at the exit poll desk?
Well, we're also tracking delegates here tonight, Jake, and I got to tell you, one place that Nikki Haley is not getting anything is in the realm of delegates tonight. There are 865 delegates at stake tonight on this Super Tuesday in the Republican contest. We have been able to allocate 109 delegates so far, all to Donald Trump. Nikki Haley, 0 delegates so far tonight. This could be the story of the night. Donald Trump stretching his delegate lead to an almost insurmountable place. So far, 109 tonight. Look at now where his totals are to date in this contest. You need 1,215 delegates to become the Republican presidential nominee. Donald Trump, 385 now. Nikki Haley way back at 43. That is going to be the key metric to watch all night long, Jake.
All right, David Cheyenne, let's look at the vote board here, the magic wall. What are you looking at right now? First of all, it looks like Massachusetts has jumped back to Trump.
And Massachusetts and Vermont are jumping around. 1 second before we get there, just to reinforce what David said. Look, Nikki Haley has no public events past tonight, right?
Yeah.
And so I no inside information. I'm just saying it is hard. It is hard. She stayed in this race because she had donors backing her. And she said it was important to give Republicans a chance, give Republicans in more states
a choice,
a chance and a choice, right?
Yeah.
So that's math number one. You can look at it that way. By the end of the night, that's likely to be over 1,000. Right? That's another way to look at it.
Yep.
It is hard even for the deep-pocketed, never-Trump donors in the Republican Party, and there are a lot of them. They don't like to waste their money. So the idea was, can she have a chance? So that's part of it right there as you bring that up. So now you look, where are we? And you're looking at this. You're looking at the map here right now. And again, if you're Governor Haley, Ambassador Haley, you want to convince those donors, I want to stay in another week, if that's what she wants. You need some wins somewhere. She's 3 votes ahead right now in Vermont, so we need to be very careful. We'll just continue to count about 28% of the vote. My home state, Massachusetts, has been jumping back and forth. Again, we're early in the count. 401 votes ahead. That's what makes election nights interesting. You watch the seesaw as the votes come in. Sometimes I say fun, but I know partisans at home don't like it when I say that word. They're not having fun watching this play out. Just check a few others. We have some early votes in Alabama. Donald Trump, it's 44-6, so it's very early, but a big lead there. And Jake, if you look at Texas as well, the numbers pouring in there as well, 73% for the former president of the United States.
All right, we have another projection to make. And CNN can project that Donald Trump will be the winner of the Tennessee Republican primary. 58 delegates at stake, another big victory for Donald Trump in a Super Tuesday that has turned out so far to be pretty super for him. That's Donald Trump, the projected winner of the Tennessee Republican primary. Let's take a look at all the primaries that he has won, primaries and caucuses. Donald Trump has won in Idaho, Iowa. We're doing this in alphabetical order, as I'm sure you can tell. Michigan, Missouri, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, which we just called a second ago, and Virginia, which we called about an hour ago. On the Democratic side, we have another projection for you as well. In Tennessee, we're projecting that incumbent President Joe Biden will pick up the state of Tennessee with 63 delegates at stake. No real contest there. Joe Biden will win Tennessee. Let's bring you a key race alert for you right now. And right now, Arkansas, the polls just closed, and CNN is saying it is too early to call the state of Arkansas with 40 delegates at stake. Polls closed at 8:30 Eastern Time. Right now, too early to call. And John King, once again, Donald Trump, and this has not happened in modern presidential politics for a non-incumbent. And people can say, oh, he's like the incumbent. Okay, but he's not. He's not the actual incumbent. People did jump into the race to run against him. There was a whole field. You might remember Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida. People thought he was going to dominate. No. The dominant politician on the Republican side is Donald Trump. And to give the man his due, he has won, with the exception of Washington, D.C., he's won every contest.
Right, and we'll watch to see if Vermont adds a state. He's won Washington, D.C., which is a very tiny vote. He's also won down here. We don't show the territories enough, but he did also win down in the U.S. Virgin Islands as well. So now you're watching to see Vermont. Just check on it. It was 3 votes before. It's now 31 votes, but we're only about a third of the way in. The major population centers just starting to trickle in. So if you just look, the map, again, sometimes you don't need to speak words. The map tells you what you need to know. The delegate count tells you what you need to know. The percentage of it has actually jumped up even more. It's 88% of the delegates, so you're looking at the percentage. Donald Trump cannot mathematically clinch tonight, but he can get within 100 or so of what he needs, and he can do that next week. And so what you have here is, he has remade the party in his image. There are still some Republicans who are trying to take it away, like take it back. Right? That's over. That's over. There's no back. That party doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
It just doesn't. It just doesn't. Look at the House of Representatives. Look at what's happening in the United States Senate. Mitch McConnell stepping aside. And some of the more governing conservatives trying to keep their power even just within the Senate Republican conference. This is a new Republican Party. And so you have a very formidable Republican frontrunner who has remade the party in his image. And I know a lot of people at home are asking, well, wait a minute. We all saw January 6th. Wait a minute. Innocent till proven guilty, but there's all these cases. He has convinced them he won the last election. Never mind anything that happened since then. A majority of these voters are going to the polls in most of these states still saying that Donald Trump should be president. Yeah. And so this is his party. And again, sometimes I think stop talking, just look. This is his party, and he is on a march to the nomination. That does not mean if the general election were tomorrow, there's a lot of data that suggests he would win at this moment in time. It is not tomorrow. It's 8 months from now. So you have two very strong frontrunners who both have very significant weaknesses. And then you have the question of the third-party candidates, which I raised earlier.
And so the weaknesses come in the sense of, in very much the way you're talking about how he is reforming the Republican Party. Right. More working class people, including voters of color, African-American men primarily, but also Latinos. And also the Democrats picking up more educated voters. Right. There's also, so you talked about the education divide, also a big gender divide.
Yep.
Men voting Republican, women voting Democrat.
And so you mentioned the gender divide. We have seen evidence since the Dobbs decision, the reversal, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, that issue helps Republicans. We have not had a presidential election. Help the Democrats, I'm sorry. That issue helps the Democrats motivate and turn out their voters. We've seen that in state after state, including red states like Kansas, purple states like Michigan, states like Montana.
Ohio.
Yeah, we have not seen that in a presidential election context. So, is that, Joe Biden has an enthusiasm. Trump does not have an enthusiasm problem among his people. He has an enthusiasm problem. Again, pick a place. We'll go to North Carolina. He has a problem among the places that are voting for Nikki Haley, Republicans voting for them. So you watch that play out, and then you come up here. We were talking earlier. He was behind in Vermont. Now he's one vote ahead.
One vote.
One vote. One vote.
Tell me that your vote doesn't matter. Right. One vote ahead.
Right. Which again, we're not done for the night. But if you do what we do and you're on live television all night long, the seesaw is part of the magic of democracy. And so 48.2 to 48.2, a third of the vote in. We will continue to watch Vermont. We do that because it's important. All 50 states matter, and every vote in them matters. But again, to not overstate it, it's fun and it's interesting, it's fascinating, we'll watch it. But when you just look at the scope of that, Jake, from coast, we'll see where we are. We touch the other coast tonight, and we get to Alaska.
Yeah, we're going to get to that coast.
Right. And so Susan Collins of Maine had the guts to stand up to Donald Trump. Trump was already winning. The easier thing to do was either endorse him or stay quiet. She stood up. We'll see what happens in Maine tonight. We're very early in the count right here. She knows what she's doing. She did it. Lisa Murkowski, the other female Republican senator, the maverick from Alaska, who actually lost to a Tea Party candidate, remember, and then won as a write-in. Lisa Murkowski stood up, endorsed Nikki Haley. So you do still have a small faction of the Republican Party that is willing to stand up and make clear, not only does it not want Trump, but it's willing, those two Republican women, most of the Republican men have gone running. Those two Republican women have stood up and said, even though I see what's happening, I still want to say I don't like it.
All right, John King, thanks so much. We're closing in on another important hour when voting ends in 3 states, including the second biggest prize of the night, the state of Texas. That could give Donald Trump another big jolt to his delegate count, or perhaps pack a surprise. We have more results coming up. Stay with us. And CNN has another projection for you now. CNN can project that in the state of Maine, incumbent President Joe Biden will be the winner of that state's Democratic primary. 24 delegates at stake. Joe Biden will win the Maine Democratic primary. CNN can also project that in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with 92 delegates at stake, incumbent President Joe Biden will be the winner of that state's Democratic primary. Let me bring you a key race alert now, because we're getting votes from 4 important states in the Republican primary process. Let's take a look at the vote board in Vermont with 17 delegates at stake. Donald Trump maintains his lead, 48.2% of the vote. He's 1 vote ahead. When I was talking about the lead he maintained, I'm referring to this 1 vote. Donald Trump has 10,992 votes. Nikki Haley has 10,991 votes. That's about a third of Vermont's vote is in, a third estimated vote. Donald Trump has 1 more vote than Nikki Haley. In Texas, in the Republican primary, 161 delegates at stake. Donald Trump far in the lead, 74.9% of the vote, 674,785 votes. That's almost 500,000 more votes than Nikki Haley, who has 19.9% of the vote. That's with a pretty big chunk of the vote in, 40% of the estimated vote in from Texas. Donald Trump off to a rather healthy lead there. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 40 delegates at stake. Donald Trump, again, with a sizable lead. It's only 2% of the estimated vote, but he has 60.7% of the vote, 8,894 votes. That is about 3,700 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 35.4% of the vote. Again, that's a minuscule amount of the vote there, 2% of the estimated vote in Massachusetts. In Maine, with 20 delegates at stake, Donald Trump has 71.2% of the vote. 71.4% of the vote. I'm sorry, they just updated it. 7,295 votes. That's more than 5,100 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 21.3% of the vote. That's with a 10% of the estimated vote in. Donald Trump off to a very healthy lead in the state of Maine, which will prove crucial in November. Let us turn now to the Republican caucuses out west in Utah. That's a state where Nikki Haley has some hope, trying to cut into Trump support. And CNN's Brian Todd is at a caucus site in Sandy, Utah. That's in the general vicinity of Salt Lake City. Brian, what are you hearing from Haley supporters? What are you seeing there?
We're going to talk to a Haley supporter in just a second, Jake, but we have hundreds of voters who are just jacked up to be here tonight, so much so that they were instructed to show up here at 6 p.m. local time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, just to check in. Well, they started showing up a half hour before that. The line extended out the door here. Then it got freezing outside, so they kind of moved the line in here. It extends all the way down the hallway here. I'm going to talk to a Haley supporter right now. His name is David Janke. David's lived here, you said, for about 39 years.
39 years.
Why do you want to support Nikki Haley in this race?
I'm supporting her because, number one, she's a great, strong conservative. She has many of the same policies as Donald Trump, but I like her policies regarding Ukraine and NATO much better because I'm a strong supporter of Ukraine as well.
And you say that if Donald Trump wins the nomination, you're going to switch over to him?
Whoever wins, I'm going to vote for passionately. And I just think Nikki Haley, with her character, with her policies, she would be a better unite her, or rather for our country. And I'm going to support her if she comes out on top, absolutely.
Well, David, good luck in the caucusing tonight. Are you excited? It's an exciting process. Tell people from outside who don't know what a caucus is like how much fun it is.
It's a lot of fun because we gather together in the neighborhood, broken down by precinct. When I go to a caucus meeting, I see half the people there I know, and it's like meeting your old family right here in Utah. So it's a lot of fun for a lot of people, a lot of excitement. You can probably hear it in the background.
Absolutely. It's great to meet you. Good luck, David. Good luck in the caucusing, and have fun tonight. All right, guys, quickly, we're going to show you where people are checking in over here. You check in, you get a wristband, then you're told to go to your caucus room. There are 36 precincts voting here tonight, 36 caucus rooms. We're going to show you some of that activity and the count as it's happening. Jake?
All right, Brian Todd, thanks so much. It looked like an episode of Thornton Wilder's Our Town was about to break out there. Let's go to David Chalian, who's digging deeper into our exit polls, especially with the question that we've been wondering about, the Nikki Haley voters in North Carolina. Who are they? Tell us more about them.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be the important information that both the Trump and the Biden campaign will be looking at here that we've been talking about throughout the evening. So among Haley voters in North Carolina, now remember, she's losing the state badly right now to Donald Trump. She's got like 22% of the vote the last time I checked. But among Haley voters, a majority of them are out there voting against Donald Trump. They are anti-Trump voters. The motivation is voting against her opponent. 56% say so. How about whether or not they think Donald Trump is mentally fit to serve effectively? Among Haley voters in battleground North Carolina, 2/3 of them say Trump is not mentally fit to serve. Feelings if Donald Trump wins the nomination? Obviously, you might suspect this will be a largely dissatisfied group. 73% of Haley voters in North Carolina say they will be downright dissatisfied if indeed Donald Trump wins the nomination. And what about, will you vote Republican in November regardless of who that nominee is? Haley voters, and this is the warning sign for Donald Trump, 81% of them say no. They are not an automatic vote for the Republican nominee. We know they're out there voting against Donald Trump. Donald Trump and his team are going to have to bring some of these people back into the fold, Jake.
Fascinating stuff, David Chalian. I'm back here at the Magic Wall with our good friend John King. We're talking about Haley voters in North Carolina. Tell me what you're looking at here.
So her percentage has dropped. It's 24% now, right? And if you look, remember when you were here last time, she was leading in some counties. We're not done yet. It's possible she will
She's
lead.
not leading in any counties.
She's not leading in any counties right now.
Okay.
And so, she was leading here in Wake County. She's down to 40%.
Wow.
As more votes come in. Right, exactly.
And Raleigh.
And then you move over here to Durham County at 44%. So she's getting higher percentages. It's about half the vote. Could swing. Let's stay with it and go through it. But as we talk about Donald Trump's weaknesses, and they are weaknesses, at the same time, I want to give him his due. And part of this is Trump's support. Part of it might also be a psychology in the Republican Party that we're over. We're done.
Yeah,
it's time to
rally around.
It's time to come home. You heard the gentleman Brian Todd was just talking to. He's going to vote for Nikki Haley tonight, but he said he'll be passionate for any Republican come November. So that's the question, right? Are more Republicans like that gentleman who says, I'm for Haley tonight, I'm going to go to a caucus? That's harder, right? You're looking someone in the eye and standing for, but he's going to be there in November. But here, as you look through it, you still have, it's Trump red. 45%, right? In the key places, Charlotte and the suburbs around it. Close elections in the battleground states. North Carolina is on the edge of being a battleground state. Your home Commonwealth, Pennsylvania. That's what you're talking about. These are the people who live, in Bucks County and in Delco and around in there, and they decide close elections. They're suburban voters. They have college education. Some of them have advanced degrees. And so, hats off to Trump, who's now county by county looking even stronger in North Carolina. But you still see the same weaknesses. And I'm just going to pop up. To my home state, we don't have enough votes yet to see this here. I'm trying to get out into the Boston suburbs area to see if it's the same area out there. Again, Massachusetts is a blue state. It's going to be blue in November. We're not trying to suggest otherwise. You just try to learn lessons from these places as you go through them.
We've called Virginia, but what do you got in Virginia? I mean, there might be more votes coming in there that could tell us stuff.
Yeah, Virginia, you do see here, again, more of a blue state, right? More of a North Carolina, I would lean red. There are some people who want to call it a battleground state. I would call it a light red state. In presidential politics, since Obama won it once, 2008, historic black turnout, it's stayed pretty consistent Republican since then. But when you come here, again, we'll see if the North Carolina results stay all Trump red across the counties. But here, Richmond County, it's the state capital. It's the blue spot within a blue presidential state, but a purple statewide state in state elections in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's where Nikki Haley's winning there. And you come up to the Northern Virginia suburbs. This is a warning sign for Donald Trump. This is an area Joe Biden won big. This is an area that's been trending Democratic. Again, the more affluent, upscale, college-educated suburbs. George W. Bush could win here. Donald Trump cannot. That's the world we live in right now. So she is winning up here, and Arlington County is, again, much more liberal. She's getting 74% of the vote. You point to those small rural county, Jakes, where Donald Trump gets 74%. I say that's the foundation. There's so many of them, especially in the bigger states. Well, this is the flip side of that. Nikki Haley getting 74% in Arlington County. No Republican's going to win Arlington County come November, but that is a warning sign to Donald Trump that a certain type of voters who live in Virginia, live in Wisconsin, live in Pennsylvania, live in Arizona, live in Georgia, live in the states that pick our presidents, the places that pick our presidents, have a problem with Donald Trump.
Very interesting. John King, we are nearing another critical hour on this high-stakes Super Tuesday. The polls are going to close in 9 o'clock in Texas, and in Colorado, and in Minnesota. A total of 237 Republican delegates will be at stake in those three states. More than two-thirds of them in one state, in particular, Texas. A Lone Star State has the second biggest delegate stash of the night. The biggest is way out in California. Donald Trump is angling for a big victory in Texas. Nikki Haley has campaigned in Colorado and Minnesota, more so than in Texas. She views those states as potentially friendlier turf. We'll see if she was right. Former President Trump lost both Colorado and Minnesota to President Biden in 2020, while Republicans tout delegate-rich Texas as Trump country, clearly. Let's go back to Ed Lavandera, who's in El Paso, Texas. Ed, set the scene for us as your polling place gets ready to close there in El Paso.
Well, we are at one of the busier polling places here in East El Paso. We've got about 10 minutes left, and people who are in line will be able to cast their ballots tonight. So there's a long line of people coming out of this particular polling location. So as I mentioned, about 10 minutes left, and we've been here all day taking the pulse of voters that we've heard from Democrats and Republicans. Joined now here by Bruce Gomez. Bruce, do you mind if I ask you who you voted for and why you did that?
Yeah, so I'm here. I'm an attorney, and I'm supporting the judges. I support Laida Inez Garcia, Marlene Gonzalez, Linda Perez here, Selena Saenz, and that's who I voted for. And it's very important for El Paso to be out here early voting.
So you've been involved in the local races. How about at the presidential level? Who did you vote for?
I can't disclose that.
You're gonna hold out on me now. All right. Well, let me ask you this way: Joe Biden, this is obviously El Paso, very Democratic, right? Is there enthusiasm for Joe Biden out there, from what you're sensing?
I don't think so.
And why do you think that is?
Just the way he's been running the country lately. But yeah, I don't think he's our. I mean, if we had a better choice.
Right. So, are you worried about what this portends for November?
I am. Yeah, I don't. I mean, if I could have a ballot with Democrats and Republicans, I think that'd be a better choice. But unfortunately, El Paso is very Democrat.
Right.
So in order to help my colleagues and the judges here, I have to vote Democrat.
Right. As things are shaping out right now, we probably are seeing Joe Biden and Donald Trump on the ballot come November. What do you do then?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Can you see yourself voting for Donald Trump?
I don't think the ballot allows me. So if I'm voting, if I'm voting for judges here that are Democrat and I'm a Democrat, then I only have one option. I'm not going to vote for Trump, but if there's a better Republican candidate, I would vote for them.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it. So, it's kind of interesting, as we've heard here in El Paso, a Democratic stronghold, Jake, a great deal of support for Joe Biden. But what we've heard over and over, it's been very kind of lukewarm support. And as you heard from this voter, wouldn't tell us who he voted for. And that's, kind of one of the things that Democrats are concerned about. We've also heard from several Republicans, I should point out, that say they wanted to vote for Nikki Haley and that they were thinking that if Donald Trump is the nominee, that they would sit it out in November if that's the case. Jake?
Interesting. Ed Lavandera in El Paso, Texas. Let's go to Colorado now, where we find John Berman at a polling place in Castle Rock, which is just outside Denver. John, just a few minutes left to vote there.
Yeah, just about closing time, as Semisonic would say, Jake. We have one voter in one of the booths behind me here, really vying to be the last voter here in Castle Rock, Colorado, in Douglas County. They have been coming in all day to vote here in person, which is interesting because well over 85% of Coloradans vote by drop box. This is one of the drop boxes here. Nearly 1 million people had already voted before these in-person polling locations opened this morning. We were here when the doors opened. We'll be here when the doors closed. I'm going to speak to a voter. I've got to walk more than 100 feet here from the polling location to speak to a voter. And I just want to say the people here in Douglas County, these poll workers have been amazing. They're incredibly polite, they're incredibly efficient, and they stick to the rules. And I give them credit for making us walk these 100 feet, not just because I can get my steps in, Jake, while working, covering elections, but also because it shows just how fair the elections are. We talked to a lot of Republican voters and Democratic voters. One of the things I've heard from Democratic voters is they're here to support Joe Biden. They very much know the State of the Union address is Thursday night, and they are looking forward to what he has to say. I do have a voter here. I have no idea who she voted for. What's your name, ma'am?
I'm Katie.
Katie, why'd you show up tonight?
I just think it's really important for our voices to be heard and for our politicians to listen to us as citizens.
What's the most important issue to you?
Right now it's education for me.
Who'd you vote for?
Joe Biden.
The State of the Union address is Thursday night. What do you need to hear from him?
His policies on education, his policies for human rights, his policies on how he's going to be handling global issues coming up as well.
How do you feel like the election is going for him so far?
I think that he needs to speak up more. I think he needs to listen to what the people are saying, and I'm excited to see how it turns out.
And how do you feel about his age?
I think that we need younger people in politics in general. I don't think that the age of any of our politicians is great right now. So hopefully we'll see younger representation.
Thank you for coming out to vote. Yes. Thank you for talking to us. Jake, let's go back to you.
Thanks, John Berman in Castle Rock, Colorado. Let's go over to the Magic Wall and see where more votes have come in and from those votes, John King will glean wisdom and analysis.
The headline there is, that's all Trump read, right? So what you're looking at the moment is not only a big night for Donald Trump, but big nights in the margin.
There's a little yellow right there.
There's a little tiny, yeah, that's
that's
the District of Columbia. We can stretch it out for you. Nikki Haley's only win at the moment is the Republican primary in the District of Columbia so far, and that's not to make light of. She got the two-person race she wanted, and she's run, and she's had donors behind her, and the Republican Party has said no. And I think the Republican Party tonight, when I show you some of these margins, remember when Joe Biden won South Carolina after he lost the first 3 contests in 2020?
Yeah.
He won South Carolina, and the Democratic Party said, we're done. Right? Okay, we're with him, and we're done. And you had a contested race up to that point. I think we're seeing a bit of that tonight, too. Number one, Donald Trump is strong. I'm not trying to say he's not. He's very strong anyway, but you're just starting to see it in the margins here. Now, we're not done counting everywhere yet, but he's stretching out. We've called this day projected North Carolina. He's stretching out the size of the lead there. And then you come over here into more of Donald Trump's wheelhouse, Tennessee. Again, more votes to count, but you see right there, your eyes don't lie about that number. You move down to Alabama, it's even more overwhelming. A long way to go in the count here, so that number's likely to change. But you see that happening right there. Then you see the early results in Arkansas. Hello, 75%. It's just the South. The South is saying we're fine with Donald Trump. And look at Oklahoma. That's every county so far. About a third of the vote. Again, things can change as you go through. Ed Lavendera just came to us from El Paso. Some of Texas is still open to vote. In the places where they are reporting votes already, you have one small county, Robertson County, 215 to 1. We'll see if that stays that way. It's only 9% of the vote. But again, just step back, look at the county lines, look at all that red. So you pull out and you look and you're thinking, okay, this could be Nikki Haley's last stand tonight. Is there anything where you can get a Republican donor to say, I want you to stay in the race, Governor? So we're going to watch these states up in New England. Vermont is still very close. Donald Trump ahead, but only by about 755 votes there. Ways to count over here. You come over to Maine, a healthy early lead. It's about 12. That's not so early. It's 27% of the vote right there as you watch. You see only a smattering of the votes in there when it comes to the small towns. Some of these small towns can be a little slow in counting. That's the nature, again, my home state. Donald Trump with a healthy lead there as well. Only 5% of the vote. We'll see what's happening. But if you see it play out, I was noticing earlier, I just want to check, only 20 votes. It's hard for me to fathom, it's my home city, that a city reports votes and they only report 20. It has to be the tiniest of precincts that the city of Boston has reported the votes right there. But we'll watch as that one plays out. But if you look at the map, the margins in New England are a bit smaller, although that's an early one in Maine. It's still a big one. Vermont is a small margin. You come down to Massachusetts, inside, I'm saying 20 points as a small margin. And that's laughable in some ways. But I say that just because of what we're seeing when you walk through your North Carolinas. You come over to Tennessee. You look down in Alabama. You see Oklahoma. And then, Jake, you see right below it in Texas, 76% as we continue to count the votes.
All right, John, we're heading into a major round of poll closings with 237 delegates at stake. All voting is about to end in 3 contests, including one of the delegate jackpots of the night, Texas. We have more projections to make right now. Let's take a look. Donald Trump is the projected winner of the Republican primary in the state of Texas. 161 delegates at stake. CNN is projecting Donald Trump will win Texas. In the state of Maine, 20 delegates at stake. CNN projecting Donald Trump will win the Republican primary in the state of Maine. And in the state of Arkansas, 40 delegates at stake. CNN projecting that Donald Trump will be the winner of the Republican primary in the state of Arkansas. We have a couple projections on the Democratic side as well. CNN can project that Joe Biden will win the Texas Democratic primary, 244 delegates at stake. Incumbent President Joe Biden will be the winner of the Texas Democratic primary. In Arkansas, CNN can project that Joe Biden, the incumbent president, will be the winner of the Arkansas Democratic primary with 31 delegates at stake. Let's bring you a key race alert right now. In Colorado and Minnesota, CNN is projecting it's too early to call in the Colorado Republican primary in the race between Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. 37 delegates at stake in Colorado. Too early to call. In Minnesota, 39 delegates at stake. CNN also saying too early to call in the Republican primary in Minnesota between Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. Let's look at some of the actual votes coming in right now, if we can. In Vermont, 17 delegates at stake. Donald Trump still eking out a win there. Right now, 49.3% of the vote, 50,382 votes. That's 776 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 46.9% of the vote. That's with an estimated 45% of the estimated vote in. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 40 delegates at stake. Donald Trump still with a commanding lead, 57.4. That was just updated, 57.5% of the vote, 24,592 votes. It's almost 8,000 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 39% of the vote. That just ticked back down, 38.7% of the vote for Nikki Haley. Donald Trump doing well in Massachusetts, although it's only an estimated 7% of the vote in. Only 7% estimated vote in. In Alabama, 50 delegates at stake. Donald Trump with a commanding lead, 84.1% of the vote, 12,178 votes. That's more than 10,000 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 12.2% of the vote. 12.2. That is with an only estimated 2% of the vote in. Still very early in the vote count in Alabama. David Chalian, where are we in delegates right now? Because while all this counting is going on, we are awarding delegates.
Yeah, as you're making these projections and we see the votes coming in, we're able to do so, Jake. Take a look here in the state of Texas. You said it's the second largest prize of the night. It is 161 delegates at stake. Donald Trump getting 114 of those 161 delegates. We still have 47 unallocated as we wait for more vote to come in, and quite frankly, the Texas Republican convention process later in the calendar, which will dictate where some of these delegates go. So where does that leave us for delegates tonight on Super Tuesday? Donald Trump so far getting 302 of the 865 delegates at stake tonight. Nikki Haley picking up 3 delegates in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So she gets above that 0 mark, but look at that divide. This is Donald Trump dominating the evening. And where is he in the battle for delegates overall? You need 1,215 delegates to become the Republican nominee up there in the right-hand corner. Donald Trump is now at 578, nearing the halfway mark. 46 for Haley. It's not even the same universe of competitiveness. In fact, let's look at what is the percentage that Donald Trump has won to date. He has won 90.9% of the delegates awarded to date. Nikki Haley has only won 7.2%. 91-7 is the score of delegates so far when you break it down by percentages. What does that mean Donald Trump needs? Well, he is on track. He only needs 35.5% of the remaining delegates, that's number highlighted in green, in order to secure the nomination. Nikki Haley's need number is 65.2%. So he needs a little over a third of the remaining delegates available to secure the nomination. She needs 2/3 of them, Jake.
Pretty stunning numbers, David Chalian. And let me go to Kristen Holmes now, who is covering the Trump campaign for us. She is at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. And Kristen, the numbers that David Chalian just broke down, so far in this entire primary season, Donald Trump has won 91, this is a ratio, not a number, 91 delegates for every one that Nikki Haley, 91 delegates to 7 for Nikki Haley, 91-7 in terms of percentages. Tonight, the ratio is 99-1. That is how much of a better night he is having tonight so far than the entire primary process so far, which, to be frank, has been pretty dominant. They must be feeling pretty good over there.
Yeah, Jake, they are feeling good. Members of his inner circle are watching the results in a war room. They are not here mingling with the crowd at Mar-a-Lago. But this wasn't just about winning. It was about winning enough delegates to secure the nomination as early as next week. Now, they acknowledged to me that it is a narrow path. Nikki Haley would only have to win about 86 delegates to stop Donald Trump from becoming the nominee next week. Now, as you said, it's a pretty striking number. It's a much wider path, however, for March 19th. So obviously, we'll wait and see how this plays out. Now, as the campaign has already shifted their attention to the general election, I am told by sources close to the former president that he's still privately complaining about the fact that Nikki Haley remains in the race. Now, the reason for that is twofold. One, he has told people that it is stopping Republicans from coalescing behind him. But two is when you look at those high-dollar donors, there is several high-dollar donors who backed DeSantis, then moved to Nikki Haley. Trump's campaign wants that money. Now, I am told moving forward, they are going to start building out their teams in places like Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, those critical battleground states. But Jake, to do that, they need money, and there is something else that is holding up money for them with Nikki Haley staying in the race, and that's the money coming from the RNC. Once he becomes the presumptive nominee, he can start tapping into those resources, those strategies, those operations that are on the ground. So this is all part of why they have become really increasingly irritated that she hasn't dropped out of the race, because they want to use those funds. But again, they were expecting a good night tonight. The question is just how good of a night are they going to have?
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks so much. Kristen Holmes with the Trump campaign in Palm Beach, Florida. And Boris Sanchez now has another update for us in some of these other projections of other important races, not presidential. Boris.
Yeah, Jake, 2 Senate primaries tonight. CNN is projecting no surprises in the Republican Senate primary in the state of Texas. Senator Ted Cruz has won as the Republican candidate for Senate in Texas. He's seeking re-election for a 3rd term, a one-time presidential candidate, a one-time Donald Trump rival. Now he boasts about being one of the most MAGA-aligned lawmakers in all of Congress. Let's get you a key race alert now on the Democratic side. There, Congressman Colin Allred has a substantial lead right now. He's leading by about 162,000 votes. He's a former Tennessee Titans linebacker, actually a former Obama administration official at Housing and Urban Development. Importantly, in this race, he is 11 percentage points above 50%. That is the benchmark that he has to cross, the threshold he has to cross to avoid a runoff later in the spring. Only 34% of the vote in, about 1/3 of the vote in right now in Texas. But Congressman Colin Allred is in a pretty good spot right now, Jake.
All right, that's interesting stuff. Let's go to a key race alert now on the presidential front. CNN is looking at these votes as they're coming in. Colorado Republican primary, there are 37 delegates at stake. Donald Trump in the lead, 57% of the vote, 87,799 votes. That's 27,087 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 39.4% of the vote. So far, it's about 1/4 of the estimated vote in, 26% in Colorado. Donald Trump with a commanding lead. In Vermont, where it's been neck and neck all night, Donald Trump's starting to edge ahead. There are 17 delegates at stake there. Donald Trump in the lead with 49.5% of the vote. 16,000 votes. That was just updated. 49.7% of the vote, 16,997 votes. That's more than 1,000 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 46.6% of the vote. That's with 49% of the estimated vote in, about half of the vote in Vermont. But let's look at Colorado, this is just some of the new votes that we're getting in here with the polls just closed. Donald Trump with a dominant lead right now, and they're 28% of the vote.
That's the question. So as we move, we have Maine. We will end on Alaska. We're going coast to coast. The question is, does Donald Trump keep running it up by significant margins? This is very early in Colorado. When the first results came in, it was Denver, and Governor Haley had an early lead there. If you notice, though, that's 95% of the estimated vote in Denver County. Blue area come November. This will be a blue area come November. But so if you're looking for where else could she get votes, if you see it up there now, this is Jefferson County, the Denver suburbs. These used to be purple or even Republican. If you go back to when I started doing this a long time ago, Republican areas, they become very reliably blue right now come November. But you see Donald Trump getting 57, 58% if you round that up there.
In a Denver suburb.
In the Denver suburb.
I mean, she would need to do...
Right. And Arapahoe just came in. This is where in the mid-2010s during the Obama presidency, I spent a lot of time out here at the Tea Party. This was one of the hotbeds of the Tea Party movement, Arapahoe County, Colorado back in the day. The Tea Party has given way to the Trump Party. I mean, if you've just watched over the last 10 years, the evolution, especially the last 8 years with Trump around.
But the Tea Party cared about government spending, and Donald Trump doesn't care about government spending.
It was a very, you remember, even President Obama used to ask this question. They all campaigned saying, we're going to vote no, and then they all voted no. And he would say, why are they voting no? Well, they campaigned on it.
Right.
They campaigned on voting no on every spending bill.
Sure.
Some of them are still around. That has kind of morphed into the Freedom Caucus and other things in the House of Representatives. But this used to be a hotbed of, yes, get Washington out of our lives, cut spending. The very Western.
No, they had a point. The deficit and the debt are nuts.
Right. But so now you just see that wrap. Again, when we get to November, you're likely to see something very different here but not out here. Grand Junction, I'll come back to that in a second. But Denver and the suburbs have become very, very blue. Back when this was a Republican state and then a competitive state, they fought it out in the suburbs. But now they have become more and more blue. But again, So you watch this, right? That, you watch this come November, and then you come out here as you move more west here. Mesa County, again, Donald Trump's at 70%. Now you're moving into a much more rural western Republican Party. And again, the question is, so you're looking just at Colorado there. You're just looking, again, from coast to coast, and then you start thinking about the margins, right? So we'll see what holds up. This is very early, 57% there. We'll see. Again, a lot of suburbs here, so there's room for Nikki Haley to make a statement. There's not room. Doesn't look like. We'll see. It doesn't look like there's room for.
May I make one point on Denver? Can you punch in on Denver for 1 second?
Absolutely.
She's winning.
Right.
She needs to be winning like 80 to 20 in Denver. She can't be winning 53 to 42.
No, there's not. You make a key point. I always say that the close ones are one on the margins. You got to run it up in the places where you can win, especially if you're running against Donald Trump. And in these rural places,
they're going
to come in. They're going to come in 70%, 75%, 80%. Some of them 85%. You got to run it up. So no, if she's looking to make, I'll come back to this because I don't want people at home to think I'm trying to play this up. If you're looking to make a statement, you need some yellow. Yeah. At the moment, you have none. If you're looking to make a lesser statement, you at least want to start, winning some counties, right? Winning some suburban areas where you can say, hey, look, Republicans, Donald Trump has a problem.
Yeah.
He's on a march to nomination, but you should think twice. The problem is, and you were talking about this with David earlier when he was running up the delegates, the District of Columbia, she has won. You're looking at this. This is your delegate count at the moment, right? Number one, if you're Governor Haley, who has, run a race, had financial backing, you have no wins to show for it except the District of Columbia. You're getting swamped in the delegate race, and you're asking people now, he's getting 91% of the delegates so far. You're getting 7.2%. You need, as David just noted, around 35%. You need to start winning. You need to start winning 65% of the delegates, to catch up. 2/3 of the delegates. You're winning 7%. You need to win 67, 68%. The map says you're not doing that. It's pretty hard to convince a donor, even to convince your staff, that this is a fight to continue worth fighting, because the math, Jake, is just mind-blowing. It's overwhelming.
All right, John King, thanks so much. And CNN has another projection to make. CNN can project in the state of Alabama, known for many things, including our own Caitlin Collins. Donald Trump will be the winner of the Republican primary. 50 delegates at stake. Donald Trump is projected to be the winner of the Alabama Republican primary this evening. On the Democratic side, we can also make a projection. CNN can project that incumbent President Joe Biden will be the winner of the Democratic primary in Alabama. 52 delegates at stake, portending perhaps of the showdown that we knew was coming. Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. They are the victors in the Alabama Republican and Democratic primaries, respectively. Let me bring you a key race alert now. Let's take a look at the vote as it's coming in Vermont. Donald Trump maintaining his lead. 17 delegates at stake, 49.8% of the vote. That is 18,627 votes, 1,274 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 46.4% of the vote. That is with more than half of the vote in from Vermont, 53% of the estimated vote. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 40 delegates at stake. Donald Trump, again, maintaining a healthy lead, 59.9% of the vote, 36,807 votes. That is 14,352 more than Nikki Haley, who has 36.5% of the vote. That's still with only an estimated 10% of the vote in. But at this early hour, Donald Trump with a dominant lead in Massachusetts. In Colorado, where the polls just closed, 37 delegates at stake. Donald Trump in the lead there, too, 59.8% of the vote, 163,982 votes. That is almost 64,000 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 36.6% of the vote. That's with almost half of the vote in, 46% of the estimated vote in Colorado. Now I'm going to go to Dana Bash, who is going to interview a key Trump supporter. Dana?
That's right, Jake. Thank you. Here with me now is Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, very much a key Donald Trump supporter. Now, you've been watching, Senator.
Yeah.
Very, very big night.
Yeah,
huge night.
Yeah.
For Donald Trump.
As he would say.
As he would say. Nikki Haley, though, is still winning about a third of the vote, if you sort of average it all together. One of the things that was really striking is the exit poll from North Carolina found that 78% of Haley supporters said they would not commit to voting for the Republican nominee in November. So what is the Trump campaign plan to bring Haley voters into the fold for the general election?
I think draw a contrast between what President Trump would do on the border on energy independence, on keeping us safe, making sure that people who are unsure about who to vote for will be well informed about how bad things are and what Trump would do to fix things. So I think a contrast on policy is the key to getting these people back on board.
You think policy will sway people who just don't think Donald Trump is the right kind of person to be president for various reasons?
If you don't think he's the right kind of person, then you'll have to vote for Biden. I don't know what. All I can say is I think a policy contest is the best way to secure people who are on the fence, because the border is a nightmare. There's a way to fix it. Trump can find that way. You know, we got to become energy independent again. So the issues on inflation, you know, personal security, I think cut toward Trump.
One of the things that we have seen historically is when people battle it out in primaries, the winner in the primary and maybe the next behind them, they have a kumbaya moment, and that helps to bring the losers supporters along. However, we have seen and heard Nikki Haley in the past couple of days suggesting that she might not honor her pledge that she signed before the debates to back Trump if he's the nominee.
You know, these things are tough. I mean, number one, Nikki's done better than anybody in the history of South Carolina. She's a talented person. I hope she can support President Trump. She can make the case of why she would vote for Trump versus Biden on policy. I think would resonate with people. I'm pretty confident. I've known her, you know, most of my political life, that she'll be a team player, that, you know, there'll come a time, and I hope sooner rather than later, where she realizes this is not her moment and there's a lot at stake. So I'd find it difficult to imagine that Nikki Haley would not support President Trump when it's all said and done.
Do you think she should drop out tonight or in the next 24 hours?
I think it's pretty clear that people have spoken. I voted for Trump, not against Nikki. And at the end of the day, there's really no pathway left. The sooner we can come together, the better. I think Nikki Haley can make a case why Trump is better than Biden on a lot of issues, better than most Republicans.
Let's talk about some of the warning signs we're seeing for Trump, separate from the Nikki Haley supporters who say that they wouldn't back him. He's struggling among college graduates, moderates, independents. What does Donald Trump need to do differently? What will he do differently to try to lure those voters?
I think make it a policy contest. I mean, you got Biden, who most people think are too old. You got Trump, who has a personality problem with a lot of people. You got to choose between two people you'd prefer not to vote for. So I think policy will win the day. Most Republicans feel very comfortable with President Trump being the right guy at the right time. I do. But people who are unsure about who to vote for because of, you know, Biden being too old and Trump being too disruptive, I think the policy debate will gravitate toward Trump, because we're going in the wrong. The one number I look at more than anything else, Dana, is right direction, wrong direction. If you believe we're on the wrong track, voting for Biden just reinforces staying on the wrong track.
There's a lot of talk about who Donald Trump is considering for his running mate. When you and I spoke the night of the South Carolina primary, you said that you're all in on your fellow South Carolinian, Tim Scott. You golfed with Donald Trump the next day.
I did.
Did you press your case personally with him? What did he say?
You know, it was pretty funny. You know, we played golf and we talked about a lot of things, but he's just really impressed with Tim's enthusiasm, the way that Tim really sells Donald Trump. He makes a joke that Tim's better for me than he was for Tim. There are a lot of good choices. I just feel like Tim Scott is ready to be president on day one.
Does Donald Trump think so too?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not, you know, he's the one picking, not me. But I think one of the characteristics of who you want to be on your team is, can they be president on day one? And I certainly think Tim can be. But he'll have a lot of good choices. Really, in many ways, this is our election to lose, and policy matters.
Senator, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And this Super Tuesday is shaping up to be unlike any we've seen in modern presidential politics, with former President Donald Trump scoring 8 wins tonight and counting. We're tracking the uncalled races and any potential bright spots for Nikki Haley at this very critical moment in the fight for the GOP nomination. Stay with us. Much more ahead.
And we are back with another Super Tuesday projection we can make right now in the state of Colorado with 37 delegates at stake. CNN can project Donald Trump is the winner of Colorado's Republican primary. 37 delegates at stake. Yet another state on the big board for Donald Trump this evening. On the Democratic side, let's look at that. States won to date. Look at all those states. Lots of red. On the Democratic side, CNN can project that in Colorado's Democratic primary, incumbent President Joe Biden will be the winner of that state's 72 delegates. 72 delegates. CNN projecting that Joe Biden will be the winner of the Colorado Democratic primary. Let's bring you a key race alert and get you up to date on some of the votes still coming in some of the states that we have not called. In Minnesota, these are new votes with 1% of the estimated vote in. 39 delegates at stake. Donald Trump taking an early lead, 78.6% of the vote. Very few votes in. That's 1,737 votes. That's 1,300 more than Nikki Haley, who has 18.8% of the vote. Again, that's only an estimated 1% of the vote in from Minnesota. The polls just closed at 9 p.m. Eastern. In Vermont, which we've been watching seesaw all night, Donald Trump still has a lead, 49.6% of the vote. That's 19,311 votes, 1,100 or so votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 46.7% of the vote. Her strongest showing so far this evening with 56% of the estimated vote, but she is still not in the lead. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with 40 delegates at stake, Donald Trump, 59.4% of the vote, 44,285 votes. That's 16,657 more than Nikki Haley, who has just 37.1% of the vote. That's with an estimated 13% of the estimated vote, 13%. Let's go to Kylie Atwood, who covers the Haley campaign for us and is in Charleston, South Carolina. Kylie, what is the Haley campaign saying about where they're hoping to pick up delegates this evening? She's only picked up a few.
Yeah, well, Jake, I want to be frank with you. We haven't heard much from the Haley campaign at all in recent hours. But what I can tell you from my conversations with campaign officials before the night began is that they were looking at two things specifically. First of all, they were looking at some congressional districts where they felt like they could do well. Like you look at Texas, right? There's congressional districts 2 and 12 where Fort Worth is located, where Houston is located. Those are places that Nikki Haley just had campaign rallies yesterday. They feel like they could potentially pick up those districts. It would give them a few delegates in Texas. Of course, they're not expecting to win the state, but it could give them some delegates. There's also other congressional districts in other states that she has visited where they're looking to right now. The other thing that they have been looking at are two states specifically where they feel like Nikki Haley could have a solid showing. Those states are Utah and Vermont. Of course, we've been tracking Vermont really closely. It's neck and neck between Trump and Haley right now. And this all comes as Haley and her campaign have publicly been very wary to talk about what their specific goals heading in tonight actually were. Nikki Haley just told you yesterday, Jake, that she was hoping for a competitive night. She said that they had goals, numbers that they were looking to, but she didn't reveal what any of those numbers actually are. So we'll just have to watch and see, particularly when those congressional districts that they're watching, the results there come in. Jake?
All right, Kylie Atwood in Charleston, South Carolina with the Nikki Haley campaign. Let's go now to MJ Lee, who is at the White House. MJ, what is the word from the Biden campaign? What is the word from the Biden White House this evening as they watch the results come in?
Well, Jake, as the Biden campaign has been watching Donald Trump sweep the evening, they have really been zeroing in on areas of weaknesses for Donald Trump, particularly with moderate voters, suburban voters, and of course, with Nikki Haley supporters. Campaign officials I have been speaking to have been particularly interested in exit polls and anecdotal evidence that shows Nikki Haley supporters who have said either that they are unwilling to support Donald Trump come November, or they're not willing to commit to supporting whoever the eventual GOP nominee ends up being. Now, these voters, in the view of Biden campaign officials, are the so-called gettable or turned off by Donald Trump voters. And that second description, Jake, is so important because Biden campaign officials don't think that Donald Trump has done himself any favors by continuing to use divisive and corrosive rhetoric. And as you know from our recent reporting, the president himself has very much directed his campaign aides to be even more aggressive aggressive in highlighting some of the more unhinged and erratic comments from Donald Trump. Now, I should also note, it goes without saying that this is really the beginning of the official start of the general election for the Biden campaign. As one senior campaign official put it to me earlier this evening, tonight really, really is important for starting to crystallize that choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden going into November. Jake.
All right, MJ Lee at the White House, Kylie Atwood with the Haley campaign in Charleston, South Carolina. And, you know, it was a week ago tonight, seems like 7 years, but it was 1 week ago tonight that we were looking at Joe Biden's weaknesses in the Michigan Democratic primary, where more than 100,000 Democrats voted uncommitted rather than voting for the Democratic incumbent president. Let's take a look at the Democratic votes coming in.
And so maybe we don't spend enough time on this, but over your shoulder there is Donald Trump, who's on a march to the Republican nomination, the delegates. And then over here on this wall is the incumbent Democratic president of the United States, who is also on a march to re-nomination. And like Donald Trump, considerable strengths. And as you noted, one glaring weakness last week, and there's some others as you look at President Biden, as you go through, if you look at the battleground state polling and the like. But you mentioned last week. This is not tonight. This is Michigan last night. Uncommitted, got 101,000 votes, 13% of the vote. Largely, not exclusively, but largely because of progressives, Arab Americans, mad at the Israel-Gaza conflict and President Biden, in their view, siding too much with Israel and Netanyahu. So the question was, there are two places tonight where we can watch. Does that continue? Right? One of them is Colorado, which is voting right now. And look, the President of the United States is getting 85% of the vote. Uncommitted is getting 7%. So, yes, that's, you won and you won big. And let's not shy away from that. So that's the thing. Okay, you got to pay attention to that. There is no question there is a bubbling of anger, frustration in the progressive Democratic base about Israel-Gaza. Now, the president has shifted in recent days, hasn't been able to get Israel to go along, but has said he wants a ceasefire, they're airdropping humanitarian aid. And so we'll see if that. But the president, just like we say Donald Trump has problems to do in the suburbs, so too President Biden has problems to deal with as well. You see in Minnesota, uncommitted, getting 18%. This is the home state of Dean Phillips, by the way, the Democratic congressman who gave up his seat to run against it. Dean Phillips' seat is to the west of Minneapolis here. And you see Joe Biden's winning everywhere so far. But again, in a state that has a deep progressive activist base, like Minnesota, 18%. So, is it a five-alarm fire? Yeah, I'll leave that up to the strategists and the people of the campaign. But Joe Biden, Minnesota, go back to 2020.
It's a battleground state.
Go back to 20. Let me come out here to the presidential race. Let me get out of the primaries here and come up. He won the state pretty healthy, 52-45, but it is a place where, Democrats are always wary because of Donald Trump's support among blue-collar voters. So as you come forward now, let's come back to the Democratic race. You're looking at every one of these states, right? And so you're trying to figure out, okay, that's healing that has to be done. Now, are progressives going to vote for Donald Trump? I would say 99.9% of the cases, probably not. But we talked about this a bit earlier. If you stay home or you vote third party, especially in a close battleground state, and I don't know that Minnesota will be one, but Michigan will be, Wisconsin will be, Pennsylvania will be, Georgia will be, Arizona will be, Nevada will be, and potentially, throw in North Carolina, Virginia, or Minnesota in there if that's where we end up come October, November. In a battleground state, you worry. Colorado used to be a battleground state. It has trended blue. You might say, 85-7, whoop-de-doo. This is the primary. Those are your voters. You need them in November.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, and it's important what you point out. This is really about Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, more than it is about the country of Israel itself. And the reason I say that is because this is not a night for Israeli politics. It's a night for American politics. But Prime Minister Netanyahu, according to polls, is incredibly unpopular in Israel. Forget among Democrats in Minnesota. In Israel, he's incredibly unpopular. But that's a conversation for another time.
It's a different map.
A different map, yes, and fewer battleground states. Aaron Burnett?
All right, Jake, thank you. All right, so where they're talking about, though, this issue of healing and in the context of Israel-Gaza. So you look at where they're looking right now, 3% of the vote in Minnesota, okay, but 18% uncommitted. Yeah. As John said, that's healing. What does that say to you?
Well, I think there's an important point here, which is that Donald Trump has been largely absent from the narrative on Gaza. Understandably, Joe Biden's the president. People who are upset about the United States policy relative to Israel are frustrated with Joe Biden. Understood. However, This election is going to be a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Donald Trump went on Fox News yesterday morning and was asked whether he supported what the IDF is doing in Gaza, and said they need to go in and finish the job. They need to finish the problem. Excuse me. They need to go in and finish the problem. So, again, if you are somebody who is concerned about the United States the civilian death toll in Gaza, are you going to turn out for Donald Trump? You're not. Now, this point about, are you going to stay home is valid, but I think this is actually a perfect example of how the urgency will turn up as we move into the general election, as Trump is front and center, as he is held accountable for the things he's saying. Most people who weren't watching Fox News yesterday don't know that he said that, but once he is the nominee, it's more front and center. So so I think that is a piece of this that hasn't been discussed. And also, I would say to the point about 7% uncommitted, 18% uncommitted. I mean, look at the numbers for Donald Trump coming out of these primaries. I mean, 35% of Republican voters are not supporting him, 40%. So if we're talking about who's pulling their coalition together more effectively, Donald Trump is the one who has the bigger numerical problem.
And, we were talking about this before, because what is true is that when you look at Haley's vote, about 2/3 of her voters in all these states are independents and Democrats. There's no Democratic race for president right now, so they're playing in the Republican Party. My research assistant, Scott Jennings, pointed out to me that in the New York Times poll on Sunday, in the race for the Republican nomination, only 9% of the people who say they were for Haley voted for Trump in 2020. So now, having said all that, this is going to be a marginal race, okay? So all of these things matter, including these third-party candidates. And, one of the concerns that I think that the Biden campaign should have is some of these young voters not voting at all or migrating to one of the third-party candidates. And I think that generally the third-party candidates are more advantageous to Trump than to Biden. I think Trump has a high floor and a low ceiling, and the lower the threshold is, the better the chances he has
as
to
we're
win.
sitting here, RFK Jr. gets on the ballot, he says, in Nevada, which now gives him Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, 3 obviously battleground must-win states.
I mean, are there 10, 15, 20,000 people in each of those 3 states that could easily pick a third door? You bet. I mean, because both candidacies have glaring weaknesses, any remotely viable third option. I mean, we've had a few elections in the last 20 years where a third party getting just enough votes tipped a state, and he's doing well better than that in a lot of the polling. So depending on their ballot access here, I mean, it could be an issue.
This is one you're watching very closely.
The RFK Jr. factor is something I think people are underestimating. I think most of us in the establishment press kind of see him as a kind of fallen star, used to be a good environmental guy, became like an anti-vax nut, and we just kind of ignore him. He is growing. He is building, and he's doing it online with all this stuff that most of us aren't really following. And I think that's going to be an increasingly big factor. My problem with him right now is he's only cherry-picking these swing states where he can hurt Biden, but he can't possibly right now put together enough votes to become president. So what is he doing? So that's
I think that's important to emphasize. A third-party candidate is not going to be elected president of the United States in 2024, but a third-party candidate or the aggregation of them can choose who the next president is through the votes that they deprive a candidate of.
So I'd say just the overall theme here then is, who would you rather be right now at this point tonight in this race is Donald Trump. Momentum, 9-0 Supreme Court decision, cutting through these states like a hot knife through butter, right? Despite the fact that he's got these cases looming out there, these legal cases, right? He's still ahead in every poll in America against head-to-head with Donald Trump. And we're just talking about a third-party candidate, weakens Joe Biden. I'm just telling you, we haven't picked Tim Scott yet for the vice president, right? When that happens, his numbers will go up. Lots of good news yet on the horizon for the Trump campaign. And I just say, at this point in time tonight, on Super Tuesday, you'd rather be at Mar-a-Lago than in Wilmington.
I want to hear from the party pooper.
I agree with Urban on this.
Wait, what did she say?
I agree with David. I have genuine
Well, Haley's out of the race now. She's got to come home.
It's an early birthday present.
She's got to come home.
Genuine fear that the Biden campaign is just not awakened to the strength of Trump. And I mean, look no further. This more speaks to Biden's weakness. 91 felony counts, 4 indictments. This is a man who it should be very easy to defeat Donald Trump. There are many Americans like myself who believe he is fundamentally unfit and the most dangerous president in my lifetime. Yet he is, if the election were today, he would beat him. That shows that Democrats have a problem. And when I hear this sort of defiant tone from Biden of I alone can beat him, it sounds Trumpian, but it also, he's not listening to what voters are saying, which is they want virtually any other option. And he's not also trying to reach Republicans who could be swayed to come to his side. I mean, waiting to deal with the border until 3 years in, that's a major failure.
Our coalition is harder to hold together. The Trump coalition is more demographically and geographically concentrated. We got to hold together a coalition that goes from the never Trumpers to folks who might have marched with Antifa. That's a hard coalition.
You can just say you agree with me. That's okay. You can just say you agree. Antifa?
I'm just saying. I'm saying that's how broad our coalition.
Well, I mean, I do admit that I'm loving this video of the people chasing AOC around Brooklyn right now. I mean, you have a broad coalition.
Brief pause. 9 wins so far for Donald Trump tonight, and Super Tuesday is far from over. A bonanza of delegates still up for grabs. California, the polls close at 11 p.m. Eastern time. Stick around. We're taking a very brief break.
And let's bring you a key race alert as votes are coming in Vermont, which has been a seesaw all evening. 17 delegates at stake. Donald Trump still maintaining his lead. 48.6% of the vote, 23,134 votes. That's 424 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 47.7% of the vote. That's with an estimated 68% of the vote in Vermont. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 40 delegates at stake. Donald Trump has 60.3% of the vote. That's 63,325 votes. That's more than 26,000 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 36.3% of the vote. That's about a fifth of the vote, 18% of the estimated vote in. In the state of Minnesota, where the polls just closed at 9 p.m. Eastern, 39 delegates at stake. Donald Trump in the lead there, dominantly, 69% of the vote. 39,883 votes. That's more than 23,000 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 29% of the vote. That's 18% of the estimated vote in Minnesota. Let's go to Kristen Holmes at Mar-a-Lago, where Donald Trump is hosting a watch party, no doubt celebrating, given the nation he has demonstrated this evening. Kristen, a huge night for the former president. What are we expecting to hear from him, and when?
Yeah, absolutely. And we are expecting to hear from him shortly after 10 p.m. He's going to come out and take the stage. Look, this is a crowd full of his supporters, but not here are members of his inner circle because they are watching the results in a war room off stage. And this is better than they even anticipated. Remember, it wasn't just about winning. They knew they were going to do well tonight. They even anticipated they might win every single state, but it was winning by enough delegates so that next week he can become the presumptive nominee. Now, obviously, we'll have to wait until every vote is cast, every vote is counted, and that those numbers are finalized, but they are feeling very good about his pathway to the Republican nomination as soon as next week. They are telling me that they have pivoted to the general election, but there are some things that they need to actually be the presumptive nominee to get. Now, some of that is just donors and fundraising, but another part of that is the access to the Republican National Committee, the RNC, and their fundraising, their donors, their infrastructure. Remember, they have kept a very lean team up until now. They want to tap into those resources, and hopefully they believe, to them, hopefully, that it will happen next week at the earliest. So that is what they're contemplating right now. Expect him to be very victorious, to take a victory lap. And I do want to note one other thing, Jake, here. It's not just politically speaking that they are feeling very optimistic. This combined with the wins that they feel like they have gotten in the legal space as well really is giving them an optimistic look going into the next several months as they head into this general election rematch with President Joe Biden.
All right, Kristen Holmes, important point there. Won the legal victories as well as the political ones. Kristen Holmes in Palm Beach, Florida at Mar-a-Lago. The Super Tuesday contests are moving west. The Republican caucuses in Utah are going to be winding down soon. Brian Todd is at a caucus site in Sandy, Utah. That's around Salt Lake City. Brian, give us an update on what's happening there.
Okay, Jake, so what you're seeing is a caucus room in action right now. The actual caucusing has begun in earnest with a few glitches along the way. These are people in one precinct that you're looking at here. I am not allowed to step in the room and talk to viewers live, but my camera is allowed to be in there and show this live. This caucus chair who's running this precinct, his name is Nick Roberts. He is now explaining the party platform to these people. He's going to make sure that everyone is registered in this precinct, and then he's going to give them their paper ballots to fill out their choice for president in this primary. But I got to tell you, this man who's running this particular room in this particular precinct, Nick Roberts, is also running this entire location with thousands of voters here, and he's had a very stressful night. The computer system backed up, and people were slow to get registered, so he stood on a chair and started yelling at the top of his lungs for people to go to this room, that room, corresponding to your precinct number, and that's how he got this thing going. But this process started about a half hour late in some cases in these caucus rooms, like this one that you're seeing live. So this is kind of the process. It's a cool process. It's inclusive, of course, but it's messy. And it was messy here tonight. And you're seeing the caucusing in effect right now. They're going to fill out their ballots in just a minute, and then they're going to start counting, and we'll be able to show you the counting.
All right, Brian
Jake?
Todd, thanks so much. Appreciate it. We're also watching the all-important state of California. Texas is number 2. California is the biggest delegate prize of the night. Voting ends there at the top of the hour. CNN's Nick Watt is at a polling location in Santa Ana, California. Nick, what are you hearing from voters there?
Well, it is beginning to pick up. There weren't that many voters. Remember, Jake, Californians love to mail in their ballots. But here, the excitement is beginning to build as we get closer to the end of the polling hours. This is the tally room. The people have just started moving in there, getting ready to tally up this vote. And where we are, Jake, in Orange County is actually a fascinating little county. Between 1936 and 2012, Orange County voted Republican in every single presidential election. Then in 2016, they went Hillary Clinton. In 2020, they went Joe Biden. You know, Ronald Reagan once said of Orange County back in 1988, he said, this is where good Republicans go to go before they die. A few of those people have died that Reagan was talking about, and the demographic has really changed in this country, in this county. The diversity it's far more diverse. So it's not a red county anymore, it's a purple county. It is just south of Los Angeles, suburban, affluent, educated. So it's going to be interesting to see how Donald Trump does here. 2016 primary, he got 76% of the vote in Orange County. John Kasich came in a very distant second on about 11%. It's going to be interesting to see what votes Haley picks up here. And might give us an indication of that sort of suburban, educated issue that Donald Trump might have. Now, the other issue right here, this is one of the key districts for the House that the Democrats want to take. It is currently held by a Republican serving her first term, but Joe Biden took this district last time around. So this is one of the districts that the Democrats are really focusing on, the House race, to try to win back control. So we're going to wait. Polls close about an hour or so. We'll see what happens. Jake?
All right, Nick Watt in Orange County amidst those Santa Ana wins, and we can bring you a projection right now from Minnesota. CNN can project that Donald Trump will be the winner of the Minnesota Republican primary. 39 delegates at stake, and Donald Trump is going to pick up the Minnesota Republican primary vote this evening. On the Democratic side, on the Minnesota Democratic primary, CNN can project that incumbent President Joe Biden will be the winner of that state's 75 delegates, the Minnesota Democratic primary. Let's bring you a key race alert now. Let's look at the actual votes as they put them on the board. In Vermont, which has been neck and neck all night, Donald Trump still in the lead for that state's 17 delegates, 48.3% of the vote. That's 23,721 votes, 147 votes more than Nikki Haley. This is her strongest state yet in this Super Tuesday contest, but she's still pulling up the rear. 48% of the vote. That's with an estimated 70% of the vote in. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with 40 delegates at stake, Donald Trump has 61.4% of the vote. Very dominant, 86,387 votes. That's 36,807 more than Nikki Haley, who is 35.2% of the vote. That's about a quarter of the vote is in there, about 23% of the estimated vote in Massachusetts. What do you got for me, John? Looking at the Haley vote, looking at the Trump vote?
Well, if you look at the Trump vote, let's start there. He's the headline. He won. You just added Minnesota to it. If you look across the map, states that we have projected and some that are still to come tonight, at the moment, they're all Trump red. So if you're at the Trump headquarters, you're happy, you're dominating, you're approaching 700 delegates. You could cross 1,000 by the end of the night and clinch this a week from now. So you could say Trump is dominant. He doesn't have to worry about Nikki Haley. I just want to show you something. This gets a little complicated, so follow along with me. First, we're going to go to the full county level of the map, right? This is now the map by county and by townships when you get up into New England. But this is the Republican race so far. So you see a lot of Trump. That's the red and the yellow. So I'm going to isolate for you here counties won by Nikki Haley, right? Let me bring this out. Come with me and bring this up. These are the counties just won by Nikki Haley. 214 counties and townships in Vermont and in New Hampshire. That's what they call them instead. As that slides across, you see most of them are up here in the New England area, but you see these other ones across the state. Those are the areas Nikki Haley has won in the Republican primary. And again, if you're watching this at Trump headquarters, it's not that much. You're not that worried about it, right? So now let me overlay this. Let me bring in these Haley counties. Oops, jumpy on me there. And let's overlay it with counties that Joe Biden won in 2020, right? So about 95%. It's fluctuating because we're still counting votes in some of these states, but more than 90% of the counties she has won in the Republican primaries are counties Joe Biden won in the 2020 general election. So one way to look at that is if you're a Republican, so what? She's winning where the Democrats win, but that's the wrong way to look at it. That's the wrong way to look at it because where is she winning? Let me just give
because her voters are mostly Republican voters.
Right. For example, you'll come in here. If you want to win Virginia or if you want to win Pennsylvania, you got to win places like this, these suburbs here, these suburbs here, these suburbs here, right? So she is winning in places that matter come November. Trump is dominating the race. I'm not trying to say he's not dominating the race, but that's just one there. And then you come up to in New Hampshire, again, a state that could be in play in November.
Absolutely.
It was Joe Biden won it by more than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. But again, if you want to win New Hampshire, you've got to do business here, here, and here, and a lot of these other places too. But these are the places that Nikki Haley is winning. So when you look at her vote, it's easy to say, okay, that's Nikki Haley. That's Donald Trump. Right. It's dominant, and it is.
Right.
It is. He is dominating. But the places that she is winning are places that in the key battleground states, even in these states here, or places like them, that matter come November. So there's a fascinating case study. Even as she is losing and being overwhelmed in losing, there are some very important lessons in there.
Yeah, it seems as though this is also just looking at the fact, look, Donald...
She has, sorry to interrupt you, but she has pulled ahead narrowly.
She's pulled ahead? 97 votes ahead with 74%. This could end up in the W column for Nikki Haley. We don't know. It's so close. But in any case, the point you were making, Joe Biden won the 2020 election, and despite what some people out there might think, that is a fact. Joe Biden won the 2020 election, and one of the ways he won was a lot of people who would like to vote for Nikki Haley for president voted for him.
Like right here. That's what I just circled, right?
Yeah.
So she's winning there tonight. Joe Biden won Virginia by 10 points. I mean, it was considered a close battleground state again since 2008. It's been Democrats, so I'm going to say it at least leans blue until somebody convinces me otherwise. I would call, but yes, so you have to.
But the point is more who those women and men in the suburbs are.
Right, and so Joe Biden won New Hampshire. Where was I just a minute ago? Right here, and right here, and right here. Right, and so if you're a Republican, so you say, well, she's just getting Democrats, or she's just getting Democratic-leaning independents. No, she's also getting independents who lean Republican, and some Republicans who might vote for a Democrat in the fall if they can't stomach voting for Donald Trump.
But let's talk about Biden's weakness for 1 second, if you'll indulge me. Punch up, if you would, Minnesota.
Let's come back to 2024, the Democratic primary.
Okay.
There you go.
So that's
16%.
Right, 16%, 9,729. It's still early. That number is going to grow. But the bottom line is, again, Democrats dissatisfied with Joe Biden. Again, as we said with Trump, he's dominant. He's winning. Give the man his due. Give the devil his due, whatever. Like, he is doing what he needs to do. But look at all these people dissatisfied with him. Now, if you could indulge me for one more second, show me the Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump Minnesota. I see it up there, right? And she won, but she only beat Trump by 44,000 votes.
44,000 votes. And you look, I mean, she won in the urban areas and the close-in suburbs, and he won just about everything else. It's blue-collar areas up here.
We don't know what the uncommitted vote's going to be in Minnesota by the end of the night, but it could be more than 44,000.
Right, so she wins, 44,000 points there. Joe Biden stretches it out much more. So again, this is because of the suburbs. This is because of the suburbs and younger voters as well. And so then now you come forward to where we are now, and you want to look at the Democratic primary. Yes, in a state that you don't think is going to be in play, but just might be in play, or voters like that here who might live somewhere else, who are just mad, and they're looking for something to do. So you watch that number. It's 16% if you round that up in Minnesota right now. I just want to check on the totals in Colorado. It's just 7%. It's a smaller number, but still, those are your voters. Those are your voters who are saying on this night, even as you run away with things, that they're mad at you. And this was the high point. We expect this to be the high point because of the Arab American, Muslim American, and the college-age population in Michigan, 13%, more than 100,000 votes a week ago. But yes, just as Donald Trump is marching to renomination, or to nomination, excuse me, he's not an incumbent, Joe Biden is marching to renomination, Jake, and Donald Trump has some serious things to deal with, to try to heal, if he wants to be a stronger candidate in November. So too does the president.